Alrighty guys, so here we are. Now, I'm making this video because I get frustrated as to how we end up here and how exactly we got into this spot. We're in a lockdown now, we're in Australia, and it seems crazy that we're under certain circumstances which we wouldn't have thought that we'd be in. I mean, only a couple of years ago, we were distracted with all our consumerism. We were consumed within our consumerism, and we had no idea about politics. We had no idea about law or our rights. And now we're in this situation where all we're doing is researching our rights, researching our politicians, researching our health, and we're becoming, well, I don't want to say experts because none of us can be experts of any of this. And I think that's probably a lot of the issue is that some of the criticisms is well, are you an expert of this? But the thing is that you can't be an expert of any sort of field in order to put all this stuff together. And I think you need a peripheral view and a wide knowledge of, or a wide basis of knowledge of a few different things in order to connect the dots. And so I think with my frustrations is that I hear bits and pieces from here and there, and I think for the other side, for the people who haven't been red-pilled, is that they can't put one thing with another. Now, the thing and I think probably the first criticism that you're going to get is people saying that that you're not of some sort of, health field, or you're not of some sort of economic field. And that's the first place that they're going to get discredited. And you see that, which is Brad Hazard's in court at the moment. And I think with the defendants, they're saying that, are you accredited in this sort of field or whatnot? And I think that's probably the issue here. And I think with intelligence, especially with people with high intelligence, what they have is a very narrow focus. So just say you're a dentist or a doctor or whatnot, you sit in your lane and you stay very focused and you do a very, very good job of it. But as I've known through trying to, even within the health realm, trying to get one practitioner to discuss with another, or either for them to agree, that they're sitting in their lanes so tightly that they're not able to look sideways. And for what's happening with the world at the moment, that's exactly what you need. You need to be able to connect the dots and look broadly across the wide scope of everything that's entailed in this new world that we're coming into. And so what I'm trying to do today is connect the dots for people. I have a model in my mind, and it's been uncanny that the model has, even before the epidemic, or even before a long time ago, since I was told about the New World Order from a young age, what happens in my mind and what happens out in the real world seem to play out pretty true to each other. So and what I've foreseen for the future, what to happen, has been based on a model of psychology, the way people work, a psychology of the economy as well, and it seems to be through history as well. So it's sort of like you need to be a historian, an economist, you need to be a health professional, you need to be a doctor, you need to be a lawyer, and you need to be all these things in order to put them together. But I think that you don't need to be a specialist in any part of them. You just have to have some common sense. And I think that's sort of like, because everything is getting so segregated into the professionalisms of today's society, I think that what's been absent is people to have some common sense. And I suppose that's what we look into the United Nations for, is to be the common sense for us. And and that is a big mistake in order to put all our faith in one place. So I'm going to be talking about the economy, I'm going to be talking about the social credit system, I'm going to talk about the future, our future civilizations, about the World Economic Forum, the Fourth Industrial Relations, talk about communists and the socialists, talk about the Eastern world with the communist China and how they're bringing their model here. I'm going to talk about the past a little bit about where we came from the World War II. I'm not going to go before the last century. I'm going to talk about all the different technological, the industrial revolutions and where we're going other than this, after this. So I'm going to try and put it together for you. It's a big task. I actually put this model together for me to try to understand it. And then I'm also going to talk about psychology as well, and then how that works into the spiritual warfare and how this has been going on for ages. And I don't even really know where to start. But I suppose that we should start in the present and exactly what we should be worried about and concerned about, and then I'll see if I can move on from there. So at the moment we're in a we're coming out of, or we're coming from an age of trying to get everybody into a world of equality and sustainability, and then what seemed to be happening is to get a movement there, kind of like a cult happening, where everyone was into this. It's basically a anti-human movement where it's like humans are destroying the planet, whether it's a capitalist, they call it the capitalist, basically it's corporatism, and the people are at fault and we're destroying the planet, and we're basically wrong. So what they want to do is basically depopulate us and take all the power away from us. And the United Nations has this great massive plan in order to have this sustainable future, and it might not include us. So, and then we've moved from there. We've had our bushfires, and that was all blamed on climate change. And now we're in this part where we've had this massive pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic, which in 2019 we had Event 201, which was connected to Bill Gates, and they had this whole model about exactly what they want to do. Just say there was a pandemic to happen, and so funnily enough, the next year it happened. So they had this model, and this model was one where if there was a breakout, which I think was very deliberate, what are they going to do with the world and how are they going to respond? And so I think they got their model, and and basically they put it through a series of tests, and they tested the model over and over to see how the breakout would and how they would contain it, and exactly how they would how they'd get what you heard for preparedness, and they had preparedness for the world coming forward. So they got this model, and basically they thought they knew what they were doing. So they did it. And so what they've done is they've released a bioweapon coming out of Wuhan, and I don't believe it came from a bat. I don't believe it came from any natural source. I think it was deliberate. I think what they do is they've got like a lab over there. They're either cultivating them or, what is COVID-19? We don't know. They're not showing us. So they're not isolating the virus in order to show us, and either because they're not showing us because it either doesn't exist, it looks very familiar, like it looks just like maybe the flu or something else like that, or it looks like something that if we were shown exactly what it is, we'd know exactly how to counteract it. So that's where the ivermectin and the hydrochloroquine comes in. And so they don't want to show us, so we don't want to know how to fix it. Or maybe it's synthetic, and if they show us what it is, then we'd know who the culprit was. So we have something out there. It's obviously hurting people, but it's basically a bioweapon. Now, these guys, they've released a bioweapon. The East have released it. They've taken basically responsibility for it, or we're blaming them. And over in their country, they're probably blaming us with their propaganda. But one way or another, it's out. It's out in the world, and basically they've also got the solution as well. So what they've done is they've released it all, and with it, Event 201, or they would have had many other ones before that, but with their model, I mean, if I was the king of the world, I would release it. Well, I wouldn't, but I would release it and disperse it amongst the people, and then I'd try to contain it and get as much data as possible. And that's basically, I mean, at the moment, they can't see everything. Imagine that you felt like you were owning the world and the world was yours to do what you saw fit with it. But like basically like a fish tank, or like basically a model like a fish tank, or whatever you want to put in there, and in there that's your world, and you're God, and you have reign over it to see what's fit. But imagine you had that, but then you couldn't see everything. That would frustrate the leaders of the world to not be able to see everything. So what they want to be able to do is to see everything that's out there, and they want to get that data back into their hands so they can get this working model. They can predict what we do, and they can tell us what to do. I mean, if I have a pet and the pet runs rampant and doesn't do what I want it to do, then it's not. I feel like I don't really have a pet. I feel like it's not really mine to own. What I would want to do is I want to have my pet do exactly what I want it to do, and I also would want that pet to love me. And so, I mean, my dog has Stockholm syndrome, like I'm its captor, and it loves me. So, I mean, that's exactly what they think of us. They think of us as their pets or their pests. So, they threw out this COVID-19 out into the world, and they thought they could deal with it. But I think their modelling was wrong, as most projected models are. They're mostly wrong, and now they're trying to scamper around and try to clean up this act. We were so naive and so distracted with watching television, and that television they had been brainwashing us for years. So with their model, I mean, remember, they can't see everything, but with their model, they thought that we'd forgotten about history. They think that we've forgotten about it all, and we're basically preoccupied with our consumerism. They have us divorcing each other. They've basically divided and conquered us in the cultural world. And basically, they thought that was good enough, and they were going to find a way in order to make sure that this worked. But what I don't think they expected is they don't think that we'd catch on, or we didn't catch on this quickly, or by the time that we caught on, it'd be too late. And it is in some parts too late. It is because we did borrow the money within the economy. Doesn't matter what happens from here on in, we can have as much as awakening as we like, but we still spent the money. There's $280 trillion worldwide in debt, and if everyone was to repay their debt, we'd have no money. So we talk about the economy a little bit later on, I think. But so now we're in lockdown. So they've got everyone, and they've said, all right, well, we've got this big world event, and now we're going to lock everyone down. It hadn't worked. It's ambiguous to a point that no one knows what to do. The orders come in weekly, and we basically we were put in a state of emergency, which gave the states powers to lock us down, and basically we're all at home, and we're all a little bit oblivious as to what reality is, and so we're all figuring it out. And we all knew it was all about the vaccines. We all knew that it was going to be all about that, and they told us, no, it's not about that, it's only for 2 weeks. Blah, 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 on it goes. And what do you know? Basically, we do, like Bill Gates did say, that we need a vaccine passport, and so that came in. And what people didn't know, and I did say what they didn't know is how these boundaries were going to be forced, because they're still trusting the government. None of us trust the government anymore. And what they're saying is, okay, well, we're going to basically contain you, and we're going to contain you all in the country. And we're going to let some come in so we can say there's a reason for the virus to spread, which was the boats coming in or the planes or whatnot. And we're going to let some people, you know, go from north to south or to break those boundaries, and they're going to be the culprit for the ones that are spreading the virus. And some people are buying those stories. So the thing is that these borders that they've contained us in, and first it was just the border of Australia, and then it was the states, and then it's your local government areas. And so they're trying to get us used to not leaving home. And they're trying to get us into working within this technology which keeps us at home, which is Zoom and whatnot, and trying to get us to bridge into the new world, which is the fourth industrial revolution, where we're basically all just connected to our sets, like I'm connected to you now, and this is the way that we connect with each other, which is not in a traditional sense of being able to, you know, hug somebody. They told us not to hug people. They told us not to hug our families. They told us to separate. And that is one of the most key functions in order to keep people together, is to basically have them love each other, touch each other. No, there's been no love in all this, but what this does, because what they know is that love is what keeps us all together, and they think that they can break that just by keeping us apart. But what they didn't realize, see, these people, they don't have that kind of understanding as to how powerful love is. They don't understand that that they're trying to make us so we don't trust each other. They're trying to break a culture. Well, when globalism happens, we have all these cultures all mixing around, and they basically thought, okay, well, no one understands each other, so they try to pit us against each other, so nobody trusts each other, and that has happened to quite a large degree. But not enough, and not as well as they thought that they were going to have it. What we have instead is we've actually used their devices, used their technologies, and used it against them. They thought that they could have gotten us, these Facebookers. They thought that they could have got us to either turn on each other, or they could use it to create this cookie cutter social credit structure, in order for us to mold into. And remember, they thought that they already had that culture with the sustainability culture and the globalist culture. They thought they had it because that's all everyone ever saw, because that's all they ever gave us. They thought that maybe they had the majority, and I think that they thought that the conspiracy theorists, the people that looked into things, I think they thought that that wasn't going to become as big as a movement as it did. But even if it did, they still have a plan for it, and they do. So because they couldn't get us to separate with each other through normal means, or their normal means of social media, and our cultures all at each other, and you know, we had racism and whatnot, they basically bring in this vaccine. Now, I don't know what's in the vaccine either. I'm a big health guy. I know a lot about health, and I know that's not the way to it. Definitely not. And I wouldn't be touching that thing with a 10-foot, you know. There's other ways that you can go about it, but what they've done with these vaccines is they've once again tried to pit us against each other. They're trying to say, okay, well, you can open on this date and you can open on that date, and they're trying to do the same thing that they did with the Jews, which is basically have a lesser society, and you have the privileged. So they call that medical apartheid, where you go one way and you go the other. But because they forced this vaccine on us with such pressure, with such force and such mandate, even the people that got the vaccine are not with the government. You think that you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound, and you think that the people, if they took the vaccine, then they would side with the government, and that has happened. You know, people have. You've seen them switch. You see them say, oh, you know, I'm not going to do anything like that. You know, I'm not going to, I'm going to stay, I'm just not getting the vaccine because I didn't believe in it. And then, you know, then their job gets threatened, or, you know, they want to travel, or they want to keep their freedoms. Basically, what these people want to do is they think they're going back to the old world, and that's not going to happen. And it can't happen. It can't happen because of the economy. And so we have to create a future for ourselves. And it means that people can't conceptualize not going back to the old ways because they've never known any other way, except for crazy people like me, because we've thought I don't always live in the present. I live in the future, I live in the past, and I live in the now. But it's hard for me to live in the now because I hypothesize so much. So, but people don't. They can't conceptualize this new social order that we're coming into, and they don't know how to prepare for it. And so what they do is they say, okay, well, if I take this vaccine, everything will go back to normal, and it's a bluff. And I also think then on the other side that the people who are awake, they think that if we all become awake, then it's all going to go back to normal, and it's not. And that's because of the money, the cash, the economy. Because what we did do is we did borrow, well, you know, America's in 30 trillion debt now, and that's just been ramped up. They're just printing money. They're just printing it, and there's no way out of it. We went from 300 billion in debt just straight, and since Rudd got in, our debt has just been skyrocketing, and it's been coming from future pension funds, it's coming from overseas bonds, it's been coming from central banks, been coming from printing money. And basically, we're up to minus 1.3 trillion, and that was as of the last budget. We'd be more than that now. We're actually losing so much money. We're 1.3 trillion in debt. That means, and if you go onto debtclock.com.au, and if you have a look at how much we're losing per second, it looks to be about minus $350,000 every minute. And that's because we're in lockdown, because they're spending money, they're spending it on, they spend a lot on vaccines, they're spending on a lot of us, they're just throwing the money away. Yeah, they're just basically giving it to us. Budget was a big issue before, but if you look into the Great Reset, they'll say the money's not an issue. It's just going to cost what it costs, and we're going to deal with it later because they've got their new order that they want to bring in. So, $350,000 Australia goes in debt every minute. That's $21 million an hour. Every day, that's $180 million that we're going in debt. Every day that we don't vaccinate, they're charging us. And this isn't, and that's about, about $500 billion a year. So if we keep on going at this rate, then basically we're spending $500 billion a year, you know? I mean, I think when we were in the 2000s, we got down to about 900 million or something like that. I don't know. We almost wiped our debt. We were pretty low, but now we're right up to 1.3 trillion. And how are we going to repay that? And obviously, we're not. And to put that into another perspective, within 1 year, when we spent that $900 billion, or 1 trillion, that per person for every woman, man, and baby for the 27 million people that are in Australia, that's $350,000 for every single person, man, woman, and baby, whether they're working or whether they're not. That's how much we spent last year for each person. And so what does that do? I mean, if you're going to put that much into the economy, basically it leads to inflation. And this inflation, which everyone's house is going up and getting spiked, At the moment, things are costing more at the supermarket. I'm spending another $100 for my family at the supermarket, and yeah, it's going up. But that makes a massive debt bubble. Now, at the moment, the interest rates. See, the interest rates, when they created debt, and they began it with a great American or a great Australian dream. So they wanted us to basically get a home, and they started us with interest rates that are really high. And they basically said, okay, for the bank to loan you money, we have to offset it against something. So instead of buying a house outright like they used to, they brought in this thing called debt. And people say, okay, well, you can borrow from the bank as long as, you know, we've got something to hold against it, and that's your house. So the great American dream or the great Australian dream wasn't the people's dream, it was the bank's dream. And so they print money and they're handing out, and everyone gets, everyone, due to inflation, their houses go up in price, and then they basically get onto this model, which has been working. It's that capitalist model, right? And basically the house goes up and worth more, and then they sell it and they make the money. Sweet. So some people, and that basically, that leverage of debt has caused you got to get on that train, or otherwise it does create the rich and the poor. But with that massive debt comes interest. And so over the years, all we've done is basically gotten more, the world has gotten more and more and more and more into debt. Now, I think this debt clock had an expiry. So you increase debt, you create debt, and the only real thing you can do is have an interest rate on it, and it's been quite high in the future, and at the moment, it's at rock bottom. Now, we can't get much lower than rock bottom. So if you have a look at the interest rate over time, during the pandemic, I mean, they were running out of time, you know, because the interest rates were getting lower and lower and lower, and they needed a catalyst in order to change it. What they did is they caused a pandemic. Now, what does a pandemic do? Basically, you basically had the crash in 2007. And they said, okay, well, we're not going to have a crash that's not on our demands anymore. We're gonna have a crash, but it'll happen on our terms. And so, yeah, you had the crash back in 2007, and then the interest rates keep on coming down, and so now we're at the bottom where we're at. I think the bonds, the US 10-year Treasury bonds, got down to, you know, about 1% or so. It got pretty low, and now it's on its way back up. So it's at 1.5 today, and if that keeps on going up, you see, if the US bonds go up, there's every other bank has to increase their interest rates as well. But you see, once you get to the bottom, and we hit the bottom, and when they hit the bottom, they just started basically printing a lot of money during the pandemic, just printing it all in and letting it out, because they know this thing's going to break. And so they made that. It's not basically just for the vaccines. It's not just for depopulation. It's also for an economic reset. And so basically, we're at the bottom of the interest rates at the moment, and that inflation's going to kick in. And so everything's going to be worth a lot more money. But what happens is, what people are doing now is that they're borrowing on a 30-year on a 30-year loan on their home loans to get these houses, which are well overpriced. You know, like, they're just going through the moon. And so what happens when they start to, well, you can't get they're borrowing it for 30 years on the basis that the interest rates are going to stay at, like, you know, 1.5 on the bonds, or 3% or whatever for your comparative rate for the next 30 years.
What happens if the interest rate doubles? That means that how much they borrowed, they've got, I mean, they've got inflation for one to deal with, but two, if the interest rates rise, then how are they going to repay their mortgages? And so this has all been, everyone's going to go broke, because if basically the central banks are loaning out all this money, and the feds are all printing all the money too, and if they're lending all this money out, and then they're just not going to ask for it back, or they're going to leave it at, the inflation's going to come in, people can't pay, so what are they going to do? Raise the only real tool they had was to lower the interest rates, and they can't put it through the floor. And so what's going to happen is they're going to have to start raising it up. And I think when they raise it up, I think that's going to be what's going to break everything, and that's going to be the economic fall. That's going to be the bubble popping. It can happen from a number of reasons, but basically that interest rate, so all they have to do is put it up. They say, hey, look, we lent you all the money through the pandemic, and now we want it back. And see, the only way out of this situation is we can all be awake as much as we want, but how are we going to pay all back that debt? And we're not. And so the only way, and so they've got their model of the way that they want it forward, and that's a Great Reset, which basically means that if you can't pay your house, or if you can't pay your debt, we're going to wipe it, and with that, we're going to take ownership over whatever you got. Basically, we'll give you a universal basic income, and you can rely upon that in order to live, and basically we'll take off your hands whatever you got. And so that's going to happen worldwide. And there's no way out of that. So the only way out of this, if we say, no, we don't want your model, we don't want your Great Reset, and then we're either going to come to war, we're going to have war against the communists, or we're going to have a recession, which means we'll go for a generation upon generation long debt to pay this off, or, which is probably the best answer, or we've got the reset, and the reset is when they take everything off you. So how are they going to implement this Great Reset? So a bit of an issue. Let me get down there. So the people who want this Great Reset, which are the United Nations now, and the World Economic Forum now. Klaus Schwab, he's the one that wrote that one. Now he wrote that one in June or July in 2020, only 3 months after, or 3 or 4 months after the pandemic, or in March, it hit the Western world. I remember in March, Australia locked down, and 3 months later, he'd had that book written about his way of how to fix the world. I mean, it's quite a feat, right? To be able to do that with everything that's going on, to be able to have written that. So obviously this was planned, and how they're going to do it. And this is basically what I really want to get people aware of. Like, people are still stuck on the vaccine and the virus, right? That's all they're talking about. They're talking about how bad the virus is, and they're talking about how bad the vaccine is. And you've got, they created a bioweapon and they released upon the world, which was a virus or whatever it is. We don't know. And then a year later, with the vaccine, they released another bioweapon. So you've got bioweapon 1, which is a problem, and you've got bioweapon 2, which is the solution. Who knows what's in that vaccine? All I know is that I've had countless, like every day I'm getting reports of people who are either sick, in hospital, getting some sort of adverse reaction. Who knows what's going to happen with this thing, but I'm not going to bloody touch that thing and let it anywhere near my family. I know they want it on me, in me and my family. So I've got to protect them. So what comes, so with the vaccine, you get a passport. And that's to basically say who can or who can't do what. And people are still falling for it, but basically it means that you can't go shopping without the passport. You need to log on to some sort of government system and show this private party partnership, which is, you know, say, such as Coles, they have a private-public partnership with the government saying, okay, well, if you want vaccinated or unvaccinated people in your shop, they have to show something between the government to say, okay, well, these people have been vaccinated, they're safe enough to come in. We got businesses, and we will not discriminate, so we'll stay locked down until it's business as usual. Now, the world, what's going to happen now, and we're moving, I'm shifting from what's happening in the present to what's going to happen in the future. And what they're wanting to do with this passport, which is basically a government system, which is very much like the social credit system that they have in China. And what they want to do is they have these Chinese communist model, and all the corporatists, all the people who attend Davos, you have who do you have? You know, you've got the Vatican, the royal UK family, you've got the Satanists, you've got the communists, you've got the Chinese Communist Party, you've got the Freemasons, or the top of the Freemasons anyway, the top of any real church, you've got the top of all the corporates. Now, they all go to Davos, you've got the World Economic Forum, you've got the bankers. Now, what they all want to do is they want to employ China's model of the social credit system, which means that everybody's being or everybody's identity is in a computer program, and we can say, okay, so that's why they're tracking, and you know they're trying to get facial recognition. They'll be and they're trying to get everybody online, and when they've got everyone online, they can see what everyone's doing, and it's working really well for them in China. They can see what everyone's doing, and they can create a cookie cutter society over there. They have a saying over there so that the nail that sticks out gets hammered. And so with the social credit system, it really gets everybody into line and working and everyone into a uniform type of society, which is just what they want. So it's their society and it's not ours. And the way they're going to do that, or one way they're going to do that, is to get us on the passport. Now, when you've got this passport, they're going to say, okay, well, we're going to get everyone on this passport in order to get them to do what they want to do and get their freedoms back. Remember, everyone wants to get back into their old world and go, and they think their passport's going to be their passport back into the old world of democracy, which we knew, but what that is actually a passport to communism. So on that, I think whenever you're going to log into your government systems, I think you should be really careful to have a look at your terms and conditions. I went to log into my government system just the other day, and in it were terms and conditions that I had to approve to. Now, have a look at them all, because if I didn't tick it, I can't access it now because I didn't tick the box and it didn't go through. I just, got out. But basically, it said that I have to monitor it, and if I don't monitor my government system within a timely manner, then I could be, I could come up to, criminal liabilities. And then they're also exempt from any responsibility. So in one way, they say I have to be responsible for checking it, and on the other hand, they're not responsible for making sure that anything on there is true, which comes straight from out of something from 1984. But basically, it means that for me just to have an online thing, I'm lawfully liable for that, and getting to it in a timely manner. Now, in China, they have a system where if you turn off your phone, you have people coming around and knocking on your door saying, "Why'd you turn your phone off? I don't know where you are." Now, at the moment, this chip is external to us, and we need to carry it for everywhere we go in order to get into the places we want to get into. And of course, that's going to get closer and closer into our system, whether it's a watch, whether it's our glasses, whether it goes in under our skin. Who knows what they're going to do and what kind of capabilities they've got. But with this passport system, our freedoms are attached to it. Now, I'm going to get back to the economy in a second, but on that passport, once you've checked into it, you can't really check out. And so what they're going to do is they're going to, the first part, and this is the caveat for it, is to get those who are on a vaccine passport in order to say, okay, I've got my passport, I can go places and I can prove to them, and the whole place comes out of lockdown, and yay, you know, they're happy. Now, all that the government wants, or all that these central agencies care about, is that you're on that passport. They don't really care about your vaccine, they don't care about your health, they just care that you're on the passport. Now, attached to your passport are going to be your freedoms, which is your Medicare, your entertainment, you're traveling to different zones outside your LGA, to another country or to another state, and your freedoms are going to be attached to that. Your driver's license are going to be attached to that, and your holidays, your restaurants and your venues, and your shopping. And they're also going to attach your facial recognition to that. And later on, they're also going to put your carbon credits on that as well. So you going back to the sustainability culture that they have, they're going to, well, all businesses in the future, if you have a look at the reset, they're going to have to abide by certain obligations, talking about tax credit, carbon credits. And if me as a consumer, invest or purchase from a business which doesn't have an abiding carbon business, then that's going to, as a consumer, that's going to cost me carbon credits, and so I only get so many credits on my passport, and if I exceed those credits, then I'm going to get taxed. So they're not just putting us in a cookie cutter society, but also our businesses also have to abide by certain practices. And how they're going to monitor that, well, basically, you've seen with the single touch payroll that's happening in business, where the government's getting closer and closer to looking over the shoulder of your business. They're going to do that the same, and you're going to have to comply with the carbon obligations with your businesses, and you're going to have to report that too and prove it. But what I want to talk to you about is central bank digital currencies, which are also going to be linked to your passports. So once you get onto your passport, they're going to pull down lockdowns and say you're all right, and then they're going to actually get everybody. So just say you got your 80% of people vaccinated and out into the streets, then you're going to have 80% of people on their passports. Now that just means that they've committed to communism, basically. And so you've got 80% of people who are communists, or acting as communists. They don't know. They're none the wiser, but in any case, they're acting as them. And so if you see in the future they've got this central bank digital currency, and that's what we don't want. That's how they're going to crash the economy, is they're going to bring in this central bank digital currency. And with that, what that is a monopoly over the banking system. And so instead of us getting our loans from our retail bank, they're going to boycott them, and basically we can still go to your retail bank if you want, but you're going to get a better deal if you go straight to the central bank. Now, the central bank digital currency, it's, if you think of the world with all their different currencies and then trading and exchanging, with the central bank digital currency, that's going to be easier for them. Now you have to think of IT and AI. AI is going to be AI to audit cryptocurrency is going to be a dream. So for AI to audit everything that's in the economy, with cryptocurrency or blockchain, as a backbone for that, is going to be a dream for it. It means it can do it live. It means it doesn't need the individual in order to report it. It means that it can just do it live, and basically it's in the system. What they're going to do with the fourth industrial revolution is everything's going to be in the AI, and what they want is to be able to see everything in this big sentinel system, is to be able to see where everything is. And remember, at the moment they can't see everything, so they're basing it on our honesty, and they audit us to see whether we're true or not, and that costs them a lot of money. But in the new system and the central banking system, central bank digital currency system, this blockchain technology that they're going to use is going to be much easier for that. Now, if we take on this central bank digital currency, we're all screwed. And the reason for that is because there's no more cash. It means that we're cashless. And so once cash is gone, then they can say and do whatever we want. That means that we're at liberty to their central bank digital currency, we're at liberty to their passport, and if we cannot use cash to purchase things, then we've got no other means of payment. I mean, you've got barter, you've got gold, but you can't go to Coles and buy some gold. And remember, the central bankers, they're buying up all the gold. So that's probably what you should do. You should probably start buying gold bullion, physical gold, because that's the only thing other than the central bank digital currency, and that central bank digital currency only works within the new system. That's the only form of payment that you're going to be able to have. So without your phone and without your digital ID, you're not going to be able to purchase anything. So cash won't work. So what I foresee they're going to do, now they still need to crash the economy, right? So they still need to crash it. So keep your eyes on central bank digital currency and where they're coming in. And Australia is in partnership with Singapore and South Africa and I think New Zealand on finding one where they're all the same, and sort of think of it as the European, the euro. Now, Brexit was a part of, we thought, oh, Brexit was great, you know, get out of that centralisation. But I only think that I think that the euro was a test. I also think Bitcoin was a test. Without Bitcoin have run its course, it wouldn't have built the road for central bank digital currencies to come out. So I think the central banks let out and they say, oh yeah, we'll do it was for the people. I don't believe it's for the people. And I think that you need an internet connection and you need to pay for an internet connection in order to extract and use it. So you might have these countries that are bringing it out, but are using it as it, and there's a big cat and mouse where China's chasing these miners out of China, and they're finding other havens, and there's a big cat and mouse game where the governments are chasing down the Bitcoin, and they may or may not succeed. I wouldn't trust it. I mean, Bitcoin, you can't get rid of it. It's always going to be there. But what they'll do is they'll devalue it, and they'll devalue cash as well. And then they'll bring in the central bank digital currency. So what they'll do is they'll get their central bank digital currency and the whole world aligned into it. And those who don't take it, they'll be exiled nations from the order until they cave and submit to it anyway. The earlier in, the better for those who want to live on the grid. But what they'll do is they'll get them all lined up, and then they're ready to implement this central bank digital currency. They're going to crash the economy. So your house, which is getting worth more and more and more and more at the moment, that's going to be, they'll increase that interest rate. No one can pay it. There'll be a crash, and they'll crash it down. They'll get rid of a cash, and then basically the dollar will be worth nothing. And once it's worth nothing, they'll say, okay, we'll bail you out. Remember, they've got bail-ins as well. So all the money that you got in your bank with the bail-in laws at the moment, they're able to take all that and suck all that out. So you got no cash. And what cash you do have, or what money you do have, will be worth nothing, because the inflation bubble will pop, everything will crash down, and it'll be worth nothing. Your house will be worth nothing. No one will want to buy it except for bloody BlackRock or Vanguard. And they're basically the only ones that will take your house off you if you don't sell to them. You won't be able to pay it, and then you'll be offered a bailout by the central bank, and with that bailout, you'll hand over your house and you'll get a universal basic income, and that's when you're in the communist system, which they want for the Western world. And so basically, you're then at liberty. Your life, you don't get to choose your job. You get to only do what they say, and when they want, and then that's the conversion from the democracy into the communist society, and that's exactly what's happening at the moment, and they can't do it without the central bank digital currency, because if they don't have the central bank digital currency, then they can't crash it, because you'll still have cash. So you probably want to get some gold or something like that. And the universal basic income, that's basically what we've already got. We've already got that's already in, that's all the stimulus, and that's what our whole world is in debt to. So I think that concludes the first part of this session, and I think I'm going to expand from that later on as to see what the future looks like and where we came from. I want to talk to you also about, Agenda 21, our Paris Agreement, our climate change. I'll wait, and how that's turned into a new culture. I want to talk about China and how this come about. I want to talk about more about how this all came into place. I want to talk about the Fabian society and the gradualism, the discursive shift which has happened, and how they've done that without anybody knowing. Talk about the Western world and the media, the system of debt that we're under, and how they're bringing this Chinese model or this communist model, which they try to do every 100 years, into society. I want to talk about the fourth industrial revolution. I want to talk about the future that we've got, the future civilizations, what's going to happen, this whole own nothing and be happy type thing, and how bad it gets. And I want to talk about the psychology of it as well. So I hope you liked it, and I'm going to continue with it soon. All right, guys. So to recap, we talked about the passport, and yes, they all do want us on this passport. This is the big thing for them. This is the passport to communism. So they've locked us all down. They've had the problem, which is the virus. They've got the solution, which is the vaccine. And without going into them too much, what that is a gateway to is to their passports. Their passports contain their freedoms, and their freedoms include the Medicare, their driving, whether they can go to their entertainment, whether they can travel to different zones, their driver's license, their holidays, entry to restaurants, shops and venues. They're going to put your facial recognition on there so they can track you wherever they go, and your carbon tax will be on there. And basically they want like this sentinel type of idea where they know exactly in their 5G's mind, they want to basically be able to locate where everyone is, where they're all going, so they can track us like their pets. And if we're not acting like their pets, then they're going to think that we're their pests. There is a debt bubble. That we're 1.3 million in debt. That's $350,000 every minute Australia is going into debt. That's $21 million every hour, $180 million every day, and about $500 million every year if we keep going the way they're going. So they're running out of time, and they need this to work, because you have to think of our government people, the people that are in there at the moment as pharmaceutical reps. They've got to act and get people to follow their orders, so they can make money for the pharmaceutical agencies that they're working for. We're basically borrowed all this money. It's come into the system, and there's only a couple of degrees of separation before it works its way up into corporatism again. So, and with that, with the economy, it's not when you borrow money, they say that they're stimulating the economy. That's not stimulating the economy any more than if I have a child and I give them a credit card, is helping that person to be financially fit. It's not. It's just basically throwing money at them, but they're not creating their own money. So with the money that we've borrowed, we have not invested it. We could have invested it if you wanted to jump on the side of the climate change side. We could have invested in a second tier recycling plant. We could have had one in every city with that amount of money. We could have had power stations, nuclear power stations, but we didn't invest in that. Now, when you invest money, it's about putting money in somewhere where it actually gives you something back. So we could have had structures which are publicly owned, but we've sold them all off. And that was due to the Lima Declaration. I'll get onto that later. But we did not invest. This wasn't. Well, I suppose it was stimulating the economy, but basically it was just bringing the money into the country, saying it's our debt, and then handing it straight to the pharmaceutical companies. And the rest of the money, which is basically the money that was given to us in stimulus, what did we do with that money? We spent it on, the only things that were open were, you know, Coles and the large chains. So we went and it's only a few layers of separation before it gets to the top, to the people at the top again. So, if I buy Nike shoes, the money goes straight to the top. You know, it's only a few degrees of separation until the money hits the top again. And so, but we're left with the debt. So we went through that a little bit. We went through cashless, and this passport, which is a communist passport, if we get onto that, they're going to get rid of cash and they're going to bring in a central bank digital currency. Now, they can't crash a system. They can't make us, they can't destroy the Western world without bringing that in, that central bank digital currency. That's already live in China now. They've rolled it out over there. They think, okay, it's a great model. And what the communists want to do, and the communists are basically everyone from the bankers to the United Nations and all their agencies. So basically, the United Nations is the Western communist central agency, and they don't want to tell you it's communist because that would give things away. They're basically selling a utopian idea to say, okay, well, we're the ones that have got the answer for the world, and we've got this collective idea because the problems that the world have is so large that one country alone can't handle it. So they need a central agency in order for them to come up with the solutions to the world. And the solutions to the world, in their eyes, are not ones that work for sovereign nations or individuality. Basically, they want a cookie cutter society, and they want us all to act basically the same. They want us to be. They want us to be. They want us to be predictable, just like you would want every other pet. So, with the United Nations being the train, being the vehicle to bring communism into the Western world, we want to bring parallels there into where they got their ideas from, and now you know that communism tries to come in every 100 years. They had it. They brought it in Russia in the previous century, and look, it doesn't work. They've still got communism in a few parts of the world today, and if you look at them, it's an economic failure. For the politicians that are sitting at the top, yeah, that works fine for them, but and I think the issue with the left system and what they have today is they're pointing the finger at capitalism. So if I want to explain what capitalism is like lots of mountains, lots of hierarchical mountains. Some are small and some are big. And when and that's fine because some of them can compete with the other. But when one gets too big, it starts to buy the other companies underneath it, and it starts to get so big that it starts to regulate the environment and starts to regulate the industry, and it ends up being a monopoly where everyone just goes straight to Facebook. But and I suppose what the leftists are doing, they're pointing the fingers right at these head companies, but we're the ones that got them there. I mean, we vote every single day with our money, and we're the ones with the Samsung watch. We're the ones with the brand new car. So we're the ones that have been voting for them the whole time. And where do these large companies get everything from? They get it from China. So China's a manufacturing hub of the world. And so every time we buy something new, we're basically voting for China. And China could not have created the economy they have today without us buying it. So it's our fault. So they've gotten so big. And so, and what communism is, instead of the people having a democracy and them voting for the government, basically, and the people owning the government, basically it's the flip the other way around, where the government is so big and it owns the people. So when you get a capitalist structure which has a hierarchy so tall, and it starts to regulate and starts swallowing up all the companies underneath it, it acts pretty much just like a communist structure. So they say if you go too far into capitalism, you're going to end up in communism, and same the other way around. So and this happens over the ages. You have a hierarchy like a communist hierarchy that gets so tall and so powerful and so controlling that the people go and overthrow it. And so then they overthrow it and brings it back to the people say what's right again. And then it happens over again that you get these little hierarchies everywhere, and then one swallows up the other, and the whole process is a cycle. It keeps on going over and over again over time. But now, instead of communism happening in certain areas of the world, now they've have this big catalyst, which is being COVID-19, in order to say, okay, we're going to swallow the whole world up into it. And once you've got the whole world up into it, and you've got everybody on a central in a central ID, and they have this this digital ID, and everyone's in with the system, which is a fourth industrial revolution, where they say, the World Economic Forum says, with the fourth industrial revolution, that the biology of the human and the technology of the cloud systems are going to be so integrated that you cannot tell where one begins and the other one ends. So that means that there'll be something monitoring your health and probably dispersing whatever drugs or whatever hormones are necessary in order to keep your levels in check for your health. And basically, they're already doing that. If you have a look at the pharmaceutical industry, if you have a look at prescription drugs. Now, prescription drugs, if there's anything anti in it, like antipsychotics, antidepressants, anti-anxieties, I think these people are taught. Now, I'm not a psych or a psychologist or anything like that, but it seems to me the anecdotal evidence is that these drugs are out there in order to keep society safe from the person, not to actually help the person themselves. So what I call them is, I call them a chemical lobotomy. So it might not be in the best interest of the person to take these things long term. I mean, sure, it gets them out of a sticky spot, and you don't want to have the mind in psychosis, because when the mind is in psychosis, it starts breaking its own self down. So yes, you do need to save that person from, committing any more harm to themselves. But the thing is that they just keep these people on them long term, and I don't agree with the effects that I've seen on people that have been on them long term. I think the idea would be to try to get them off them. But I feel like the way that these people have been taught is that you just basically keep them on them for good. And why I think they've been told to keep them on them for good is because, you don't want to go to the bus stop and have some guy acting out because he hasn't had his meds and start, attacking the person next to him at the bus stop. You definitely don't want that. But I think as a human being in charge of their own life, they need to stand on their own 2 feet as soon as possible. Yeah, sure, put the training wheels on for a certain amount of time, but you need to get that person on their own 2 feet and get rid of the crutches. And so why, it doesn't make any business sense to be able to get these people off their drugs. So why it doesn't seem surprising to me that the academia, in order to get these people and keep them on it, hasn't been somewhat financed by the pharmaceutical industry some way, somehow. I mean, I don't have any proof that that's happened, but it does seem that the benefit is there for the pharmaceutical company and not for the individual. So that's one way of having the people dumbed down, or the people in a stupor enough. They're capable enough to go to work, but they're not going to live out their full potential. and who wants individuality and who wants a full potential. All you basically want is clones, robots, and people who are going to fit the bill and toe the line. And towing the line is very very much an ideology of communism, and having people all basically the same, all basically moving along like ants. And if we have a look at China's dictatorship, basically China is still under communist control. Russia was, and now it's being pulled into a democracy, and they're better for it. Anyway, I'm not sure if I trust Russia either, but because obviously there's still going to be communist, people who are still communists, and communist parties in circulating within that society in secret. But with China's dictatorship, it was they had. I mean, imagine if your government said that you can only have, that population is getting out of control, and you can only have a one-child policy, which China did have. So, and now they've got a two-child policy. So, okay, the population's getting out of control, and the economy's going poor. So we're going to say to all the families and have forced abortions for those people that had more than one baby. You know, imagine that happened here, but that's just the kind of control that they have. And what that ended up becoming is now they have what they call a 4-2-1 society, where they have 4 grandparents, 2 parents, and 1 child. And the structure they have over there is that the child looks after the grandparents and after the parents. So there's a lot of pressure now in China for the youngest generation in order to look after the older generation, which still haven't died off yet, and that's probably why they're trying to kill them. I don't know, but people that don't work aren't good for the economy, and so they suck a lot out of the economy. Anyone that doesn't work, so they have a 4-2-1 family over there now, and they're struggling economically because of that region, that reason. Also in China, religion is not free. The Muslims over there, they kill them. Apparently, they deny that they kill them, but by a lot of accounts they do. There's no Bibles over there. You can't get a Bible, and imagine that was here. Imagine you didn't have that freedom here. Their religion over there is to worship the state leader. They don't have adaptation, and adaptation is where you have individuality, where, they have this, and that's what happen now is we're starting to get censorship, because today all the different services went down. We had Facebook go down. We also had Zoom go down. We had all WhatsApp go down, and YouTube go down. I don't know what's happening there right now, but that's happening today. Not sure what's happening there, but in China they have a great firewall of China, so it's very controlled as to what hits the internet over there and what kind of information they can get from the Western world and the outside world from outside of China, and what comes in and what can go out. So it's all very controlled. It's all quarantined, and the information is quarantined to a point where they don't know what our politicians say. They're none the wiser at all, the poor buggers over there. And so they can't adapt to the other realms of the world. So we have immigrants over here, and they bring their religion with them, they bring their culture with them, and we embrace it. But over there, it's that they don't have that adaptation. The adaptation. You must adapt to the state rather than anything else that might influence you. They also have production over innovation. So in communism, you have, it's all basically, well, if I have a business and I need to buy something, and I need to make something. Basically, it all comes from China. Now, that's been, and China was in a lot of trouble, and economically they've come a long way. So they don't really innovate anything. It's the Western world, because we've got the individualism over here, and they don't have that. Well, they don't have that adaptation, so they're not brought up to think freely, which is pretty much a polar opposite to what you have in Silicon Valley. So what China does is China steals all the IP from the Western world. I mean, Australia used to be the solar capital, and we used to be frontiers in how solar power works. Now, we had a Chinese guy come over here and study in the university. He was a brilliant person, obviously selected by the Chinese government to come over here and study, become an absolute brilliant mind, see what processes we've got here, goes back over there and starts his massive company. And now, who's the leader in solar supply? It's China, obviously. And now we own our production here is. So we got rorted on that one, and that's happened with our phones. The phone that I'm using now, this here, it all basically all of it comes from China. And they don't make anything. I mean, they make everything, but they don't invent anything. They just basically copy, and so they have production over innovation, and that's a very big cue of a communist nation. And so basically, you go and do what the state says. The state puts you in a place. So when you're born, you're assessed, and you go, okay, you're genetically very strong. You're going to the Olympics, or you're a great mathematician. You're going to be in this line, and so you don't have that free choice there. They also have collectivization, which will be an issue if that comes here. I mean, a lot of our exports are from the farming, and so with farming, it's like you don't have private farming. You don't have private rights to farm, and you're going to see that now in Australia, where the overreach of the government is looking further and further and further over your shoulder as to your regulations to be able to farm. And over in China now, they have rural collectivization, so it's all centralized, and your quotas, and it has to is obliged to fall in line with what the state needs. It's not what you need; it's what the state needs, and so it's all for the state. Look, the whole thing's built on tyranny. If there's anyone that speaks out about it, they get axed. If there's any system that seems to oppose a state, it gets axed, and they'll basically kill you. With any communist realm, you'll see that they'll get that army. They'll get the army, and in China they have the People's Liberation Army. They'll just run you straight over, and where we're starting to see the tyranny within our own police, and they've been told orders, and you see them in the protests. They say, "Look, I don't want to do it, but I'm just following orders." Same as the people in China. Now, these people who are coerced into doing this, and they say, "Look, I've got no other way of doing it, so I've taken the jab because I've been coerced into it. I've got no other way. I don't know how to do anything else. I only know how to be a police officer. So if I don't do this, and my family doesn't get to eat." And you should say, "Well, fair enough," but it's not really fair enough. These people should stand up, and but then you sort of got to understand where they're coming from. But because these people don't understand, they've never looked at history, they're basically just grown up on the TV, and they don't know any better. They just know, all they know is what they've been. Our brains only know what we've been exposed to, and all they've been exposed to is they've grown up. They go, "Okay, my dad was a cop, I want to be a cop too," or something like that. They want to do good for the world, and now they've found themselves in a spot, and they don't know they don't really have any foundation in order to make a better choice than that. And so, and those exact people are the people that they're going to choose in order to put in power. But they have no problems with murdering people in the past. I mean, that would seem unusual for that to happen here. But in China, Mao, he killed 80 million people. That's a lot of murder. That's a lot of starvation. Thank you. Thanks so much. And Hitler only. I mean, we look all about Hitler because Hitler. It seemed like communism went to the Eastern world, and Hitler and the fascism went to the Western world, and you saw that with the Great Wall of Berlin, the Berlin Wall, but Hitler only had 17 million. Now Stalin, who was also a communist, he killed 22 million. So just Stalin alone, and then Mao in China. He had 80 million, so that's 100 million as opposed to Hitler's 17 million. So how come we weren't taught about communism? If it was at least 5 times worse than what Hitler did, how come we were only taught about Hitler and we weren't told about communism? And that's because communism never died, and it reigned on, because after World War II, straight away the United Nations was formed, and the United Nations it also had like a gradual discursive shift as to being the people doing good things. They actually pushed North Korea away and back up into China, the United Nations Army. But so it's sort of like it started white, and it started turning more and more communism, and we still trust them because we think that they're doing the great things for the world. But in actual fact, they're basically just trying to slide in communism and socialism. Well, socialism is a stepping stone to communism. So and they think that we don't see that. But basically, they're bringing in socialism and showing that as a utopian ideal. Now, anything that is communism, anything before communism gets into power, it gets marketed as utopian. So they're saying, okay, the capitalists, the big fat cats of the world, they've ruined everything. So this, what you're hearing today with the socialists, there's nothing new. They're saying they've ruined everything. And these big fat cats, we need to defund them, tax the rich. You'll see that on the back of someone's dress recently, and funny because that person's obviously rich, so it makes no sense. But even Elon Musk's his girlfriend Grimes, she's a massive communist. Go and have a look at the Instagram page. She's pulled down a few things now, but she's just a massive Satanist. Doesn't look like she denies it. She has communist friends. She pulled out a video, my communist friends. And it all gets sold to them via utopian ideal, saying that these people are hoarding all the wealth to themselves, and they need to distribute the wealth. So what the government's going to do is we're going to tax them more and more and regulate them, and we're going to disperse that amongst the people. Now, what that does is, it doesn't work. We've seen it doesn't work. The Karl Marx and the Leninism. So the Leninism is actually the implementation of the Marxist ideas. And so what they plan to do is to basically spread the wealth, and it takes away that individuality. It takes away. It means everyone must follow that perfect order that the state says in order for everyone to be better off collectively. Now, to give the devil its due, it has worked in China. They're becoming from stealing from the IP from the United States, and they have copied everything, and they, to give the devil its due, they are rich now, and their army is massive, and they are a force to be reckoned with. And now they're bringing out their Belt and Road. Now their Belt and Road has wiggled all its way right into, which is like the old Silk Road, where I think of it as like China as the head of the octopus and the tentacles going out and reaching around the world and distributing, and wants to be the manufacturing hub of the world. So they've gotten the model to work, and they want that model to come into the Western world. Now, they've bought our politicians. I mean, it all just comes in grants. It's like, well, it all just comes in grants. Like, they fund the United Nations funds your schools, so you have this, they're teaching our children to be socialists. And if you don't believe me, go and see because if you go and see if your school's under a UNESCO system. Because if you're a school and you're not taking on board the UNESCO system, you have to pay for your own system. And then you have to make your own system as well. You have to make your own education, make your own education system. But if you take on UNESCO's one, they've built the system for you, and they're going to fund you as well. So, which one are you going to take? Oh, well, okay, well, I'll take the funding. That means I can pay my teachers more, and I can get more as a principal, or the diocese, and I'll implement their curriculum. And the curriculum is one that has a non-binary, you should see it. You should see the United Nations, what's it called? Their sex education. It's strange. Basically what they're trying to take away is the individualism to the point that there's no such thing as sex, as in male and female. And there's no real line. So it's another way to take away individualism. They're blurring the lines there, and they also, like, my school had a National Sorry Day. I mean, why is and a National Sorry Day is to say sorry to the original custodians of the land that they're actually, having assembly there on old land. And I mean, all that is divisive. You've got a black kid there, and he's getting told, he's getting apologies from white kids, and he's like, well, why are they saying sorry to me for? He probably didn't even know that he was black, and then you've got the white kids, my white kids, that are apologising for things, they're feeling guilty for things just because of the colour of their skin. So it's just strange, Feminism is a big one with the socialists, but I'll get onto that later. Before I get into that, I did want to read out a few of the declared goals of the communist takeover. They want to promote UN as the United Nations as the only hope for mankind. It is demanded to be set up as a one world government with its own independent armed forces. They will resist any attempt to outlaw the Communist Party, do away with loyalty oaths, as you've seen, amen and women, remember that one? They're just making a mockery of it. Capture one or both of the political parties in the United States, use technical decisions of the courts to weaken basic American institutions by claiming their activities violate civil rights, which is you're starting to see. Now, Jordan Peterson had a good quote saying, "Your rights is my responsibility," which is such a fantastic, you get people coming up with their rights, but as soon as all these people, I have my rights and I have no rights and I have my rights, and me as another individual, I have to respect those rights. So that's my responsibility. So I find that the more people that they have their minority rights, that becomes a responsibility of somebody else. to get control of the schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda, soften the curriculum, get control of teachers' associations and put the party line in textbooks, gain control of all student newspapers, use student riots to foment public protests against programs or organisation which are under communist attack, infiltrate the press, get control of book review assignments, editorial writings, policy-making positions, gain control of key positions in radio, TV and motion pictures, continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression. An American communist cell was told to eliminate all good sculpture from parks, buildings, substitute shapeless, and substitute it with shapeless, awkward and meaningless forms. Now this was written in, when was this written? In 1963, and you've seen these play out. Eliminate all laws governing obscenity, calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press, breaking down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio and TV, present homosexuality, degeneracy and promiscuity as normal, natural and healthy, infiltrate the churches, which has definitely happened, that's why we don't trust them anymore, and replace revealed religions with social religion, discredit the Bible and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. Eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools on the ground that it violates the principles of separation of church and state. Discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate, old-fashioned and out of step with modern needs, a hindrance to cooperation between nations on a worldwide basis. Discredit the American founding fathers, present them as selfish aristocrats who had no concern for the common man, belittle all forms of American culture and discourage a teaching of American history. Support socialist movements to give centralized control over any part of the culture, education, social agencies, welfare programs, mental health clinics, etc. Infiltrate and gain control of more unions, and infiltrate and gain control of big business. Transfer some of the powers of arrest from the police to social agencies, treat all behavioural problems as psychiatric disorders, which no one but psychiatrists can understand or treat. Dominate the psychiatric profession and use mental health laws as a means of gaining coercive control over those who oppress the communist goals. So, you know, I might read this to here and now get some people in white coats come and say that I'm crazy and come and drug me up. Discredit the family as an institution now and encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. Now, I think in the 1970s, only 5% of women had more than one, had only had no sex before marriage, and now, no, over 25%, and now it's down to 5%. And so that there has been a swing there, that's for sure. And there has been, you know, oh, you haven't had sex yet? What's wrong with you? And virginity was like a disease that someone's got to get rid of. I've seen that throughout my lifetime quite a bit, and I don't see that it's gotten better. You know, if the whole world just, you know, didn't have sex before marriage, there'd be a lot less disease. There'll probably be less population, but you know, I see that has happened quite a lot. Emphasize the need to raise children away from negative influence from parents. So separating children from parents, all children be raised by the state. Create the impression that violence and insurrection are legitimate. Yeah, so they're trying to say that violence is a necessary thing. Overthrow all colonial governments before native populations are ready to self-govern. Now that's a big one. So that's happening now, where they're overthrowing colonial governments and overthrowing them and giving them back to the original custodians, but even when they're not ready to self-govern, which is what you're seeing at the moment as well. Going back to my model. So that's communism for you. So that's communism for you. And
how did that make its way into the Western world? I mean, we know that we've had COVID and the United Nations as a way to get it in here, but this didn't just happen overnight, and it didn't just happen with with the pandemic either. So I'm going to talk about the past a little bit and a little bit about how the East and the Western world are separated. So in the East, you had Stalin, you had Mao in China, you had North Korea, and they were the communist side on the eastern side of the world. They had slave labor under communism, and they killed anything opposing the dictatorship in communism in the Eastern world. In the Western world, you had Hitler, and Hitler was a fascist. Now, fascism is where there's a certain type of people which are favoured, and then those who aren't in line with that favoured person, favoured type of person is second rate and to be ostracised from society. So there's a divide there, and it's just like communism. Fascism is an authoritarianist type of establishment where it still has control over the people rather than people having control over it. But what they provided for the people was an answer, sort of like communism, where communism is saying, okay, well, we're going to distribute the wealth amongst the people, and that's going to be that utopian type ideal. Instead, fascism had an ideal type of person, and over there they had white people like myself, blonde hair, blue eyes, and white skin. And the lesser people in society were the dirty Jews, you know, and they said that the Jews are all huddling together. There was a lot of propaganda against the Jewish culture. Now the Jews, I mean, to their credit, you know, the Jews did socialize very well, and even to this day, even though they were exiled out of Israel, even though they were almost killed in World War II, those that were left, they're bound together. And if you want to have a look at IQ, the Jewish people are, if you're going to broadly spread them, say which kind of culture has the highest IQ, it is the Jews. So perhaps they were a threat, and they were a threat to the establishment. And so Hitler called them out and said, "Okay, well, we're going to exterminate them." Absolutely horrible. And what I want to bring parallels with the fascism of yesteryear and the fascism we have today is a correlation between disease and authoritarianism. Now, the correlation between disease and an authoritarian state is higher than the correlation between IQ and getting good grades. And the correlation, and that's from a Jordan Peterson. He had that one, and basically and so you can't get a higher correlation than that. You can't get a higher correlation than high IQ and good grades, but there is one, and that's disease and authoritarianism. And so what they did is they say, okay, well, these Jews are dirty. They live like scum. They live like rats. And so what they basically did was segregate them and border them up and say, okay, well, they can't go to these certain places in society, and they're not allowed in here. And I mean, those parallels is still what you're seeing today with the vaccinated and unvaccinated. And the unvaccinated are the dirty Jews of today. Perhaps the unvaccinated should walk around with the Star of David on their shoulder. And so
and what they did with these, and what they happened when they have an authoritarian society is they're very big on being clean. So back then, just like today, they're trying to get rid of tuberculosis. So they thought, okay, well, tuberculosis, yeah, let's get rid of it, just like they're trying to get rid of COVID today. And so they cleaned everything. In Germany, they got rid of all the rats out of all the factories, and they cleaned everything up. And they used a chemical there in order to kill all the rats. And that same chemical that they used to kill the rats is the same chemical that they used to kill the Jews in the concentration camps. And so with that came a lot of structure. You know, you see us walking in lines and we're 1.5 apart and we have to walk in this way and walk out that way, which is absolutely absurd. But that kind of structure and that kind of it is the same as what you found in Hitler's reign, where he would set people in perfect uniform structures where everyone would work the same. So you do see those parallels there with the social credit system, how they all want us to be in a cookie cutter society. It's nothing new. It was done last century, and so what they did is now we have a medical apartheid where we have the vaccinated one side and the unvaccinated, and what they're trying to do is have us attack each other. The exact same thing is what they had is apartheid you have your Jews on one side, they go one way, and then you have the privileged on the other side, the privileged white folks. And so they both have mass killings. The communist world and the fascist world, they both have mass killings, and they're all put in camps. And then, of course, World War II came together, and actually the fascists fought the communists there. And why did America come in at the end? You know, we had the UK fighting. You had Russia fighting them and pushing them back and wearing them down. And in the end, America came, and there's a thing called Operation Paperclip. So America came to get all the goods. I can't remember the word for it, but basically they came to round up everything that was left over. And basically that was the scientists that they were after. And so there was about 1,500 scientists that the Americans scooped up and says, how did you do it? How were you able to get these people in order and to kill people? How were you able to coerce them to do it? What kind of system was it that you could get them and put the people that were willing to go ahead and hurt people and then promote them into more, you know, and they did it with drugs. You know, these people were on ice the whole time, and so they didn't have any empathy. It was basically part of their brain that just was skipped over, and you just see that with the ice junkies. So they don't have any empathy. They just want what they want, and feel nothing. And so, but these ideas, and not just that, but also the chemistry, and they took. World War II wasn't won. It just had moved countries, and they moved these scientists and gave them green cards and brought them into the US, and they worked in the universities and taught the US on how to brainwash America and the rest of the world through the media. And there was and there's another thing called MK Ultra, which is basically the psychological the psychological way of how to get people to get stupid, and everything that's on that TV is come from, well, basically it's the same system. It's Hitler's system. You watch that TV, you're watching Hitler's system. All the movies and all the horror and everything that comes from it. And so you had the Western world, which was the fascist world, and then you had the communists on the other side. Now, with this new system that they're bringing in, they're bringing the best of both, or the worst of both of them, which you have on the communist side, you have the overpowering slave society, cookie-cutter society, where it all goes to the state, and the state will spread amongst them as they see fit. And on the fascist side, you've got the apartheid, where you've got your lesser people of society who don't get to go in here and don't get to go out there, and then you've got the privileged ones, and which is built to basically make us attack each other and divide us and kill our love. So where do we go from there? So yes, so basically they had those two systems, and okay, the people won in the last century, and we said, okay, well, we won, and so capitalism reigned, and along we go. Thanks, boss. And so, well, they had to begin again, and so they came up with this idea that the world's overpopulating, and they come up with this thing called the United Nations, and we need to save the people from themselves. And so they had the Club of Rome, the Eastern world, the communist world, they recluded into a recluse, and we didn't hear about them for a long time. In China and Russia, they went behind their curtains and continue with themselves. And in the capitalist world, in the West, we basically built things and innovated and watched TV and built the American dream. So the bankers were hard at work getting us to get loans off them and basically build their world. You know, I mean, we've built everything. You know, men get such a hard time these days, but everything that's been built has been built off the breaking backs of men. Roads, everything that pretty much you touch. You know, we built it in the Western world, and it's all there, and it's it's crazy that with such a defunct society that we were actually able to build all this stuff. However, they want it back. So they build this thing called the media. And in the media, they've got us committing to consumerism. So, I want that new watch, and then we innovate a new product, and then basically we've got to have the new one, and even if the old one's not worn out, we still want the new one again. And it's on that consumerism, and then we've got to keep up with the Joneses. And the media built that. There's a lot of brainwashing there. There's desensitizing there. There's promotion of debauchery. There's distraction away from things that, you know, I mean, we used to go to church and have and have bonding things, but now we just basically, we're more interested in things than we are people. There's horror. There's biased press in there, and it's all one big ugly system, and it's all to do with controlled manipulation. So the media, which came from MK Ultra, and which is it's very interesting. You know, you turn on the TV, try to have a conversation with your missus, and you turn on the TV, and you won't get through all the conversation because, you know, like a moth, we go to the light. You know, we look at the light, and we get drawn to it, and it's very interesting. And so the media and the television they get the truth and they twist it. And they twist it, and you try to make sense of it, and you're like, that's not like reality. It's kind of like reality, but and as you watch the television, you're basically trying to make sense out of how this twisted reality, which is on the tube, fits in with your life. And if you watch it enough, you believe that that's actually real. And no joke, I mean, you and I believe what comes through that tube. And it becomes more of a task to think of what is real and what's not real. And it's not just the TV, it's the Facebook as well. You know, every single post that you have a look at, you've got to read between the lines to see how much truth is in it and how much truth isn't in it. And sometimes the best thing to say about that is, well, it may be fake, but if one little bit of that piece of information is true, how bad is that? And that's the same with me talking to you on the tube. If there's one thing that I've said to you on this that's true, how bad is that? So, But with the media being its twist, you know, with your movies, they put you in this fantasy land, and you can only twist the fabric so far until it snaps back. And so, but if they get you in these computer games and a twisted form of reality for too long, you're actually going to believe that it's real. And that's where we come into the political system. So we see that, and we saw that with 9/11, and we saw that with all the newspapers surrounding Diana's death. If they keep on telling you the same story over and over and over again, you're going to believe it. And so that's the same thing that's happening now. And even though that we know it's a lie, we don't know what the truth is, so we go with the lie, which is fascinating, but that's what's happened. And so with that system, we've had this controlled opposition within our political system, which is a two-party preference system. So you've got Liberal or Labor, you've got your lefts and your rights, and basically they're two sides of the same coin, and basically they look like they're fighting each other. And so you're going to vote for one of them because you believe in one of them the other, but basically they both want the same thing, which is control over your life. And while these people who have sold out to their employers, they're getting paid. You know, they're getting paid. And so from here, where am I going to go from here? I'm going to probably talk about how that wiggled its way into Australia. So with the media controlling the political system, we've had a gradual discursive shift and a subversive message and a subversion of politics coming from what we knew as a colonial Australia system, which came from the Commonwealth, and somehow it's tried to merge into something that's come out of either 1984 or China or from Hitler. I mean, how did they do that? And it's the Fabian Society. So you have all the different groups of the world, the secret societies, and it seems that a lot of our leaders, being Julia Gillard, Bob Hawke, Tony Blair, Bob Carr, Paul Keating, Go Whitlam, John Howard, they're all part of this Fabian Society, which began in 1884, and it began in London, and it's worked its way down to our part of the world, and basically their idea was to not fight, but to subversively take over a nation without letting them know that they're at war. So this Fabian Society, their emblem was a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's basically a wolf wearing a sheep. And so just like the United Nations, you see that they come along as the hero, but they're anything but. And they're supposed to be within philanthropy helping the world, but they're anything but. They should stay away if they want to help and let the economy and let the ecology of that nation sort itself out. I mean, you look at that, we try to do that with Afghanistan. You know, the place come from a war-torn nation, and it still is, and it always will be, because it's just basically a bunch of warlords trying to get what they can for the now. There's no long term in any of that, and America tried to do that with them, and it'll never work, because that's what that nation is, you know. Anyway, they're doing that in Australia because we're sensible people, so they're going to knock some sense into us, and that's basically the Fabian Society, and they came through as these leaders are coming through as showing themselves as a democratic nation and for the people. But I mean, time has shown time and time again, but that they're anything but. Now, where am I going to go with this? Now, what happened back in 1975? So Australia was Australia. You probably know back in the 60s and 70s, Australia was the Australia that we loved. You know, the 80s, we loved it, you know, because we hadn't been sold out yet. And if anything, we want to go back to the 80s, or we want to go back to the 70s where, you know, life was beautiful, 30 years after the war, and there was a lot of, you know, freedom, you know, and life felt good. It felt, I mean, I can't let my kids out in the street today, you know, it's just, life isn't like that anymore. And this is before the pandemic. But in 1975, we sold a United Nations document called the Lima Declaration. And the Lima Declaration is, it's an act of equality. It's basically pitting developed nations, and Australia is considered, in the eyes of the United Nations, a developed nation. So we've got roads, we've got an economic structure, we don't have too much poverty, and we're a developed nation. We're a first world. And then you have developing countries, places like Africa and South Asia and China. China's a developing country, even now still considered as a developing country. And basically the Lima Declaration was an act to give rights of manufacturing and exports to developing countries. So that means that Australia cannot compete with developing countries due to regulation. So if we farm wheat and Africa farms wheat and we both sell to the world, Africa's got to get a better price, or they've got to be able to take the market over us. And so fair work cover, superannuation, tax, GST, loss of income protection from unions, the corporations will choose to bring their labour offshore and not work within Australia, and to the cheaper competitions that from other countries, which is exactly what's happening. And so that's why we've had a lot of shutdown from, you know, Holden plant, your Ford plant, a lot of our rail lines. We've lost almost all of our national large companies and exports, you know, Ansett, Ampol, Mitsubishi, I think we had a plant. And Australia imports now, we used to use our own consumables, and now all our consumables and goods are imported. You know, we're surrounded by sea, but we import all our fish and we export all our fish. You know, the same with our beef. You know, it's just crazy, you know, that we can get cheaper, due to globalization, we can get cheaper goods from overseas than we can from in our own country, and it's just ridiculous, you know, and that's because big corporations, you know, the US owns more of Australia than China actually, and the big corporatocracies over there come in and swallowed up our small companies, you know, like Vegemite and Arnott's and things like that. So we've had a sell-off since 1975, and it's the direct opposite approach as to what's happening in China. So we're selling off our manufacturing, and China is being the manufacturing hub with their belt and road system, their tentacles spreading out to the... So we've given all our manufacture to developing countries, and this happened because we signed the Lima Declaration in 1975. We got sold out by Go Whitlam, who was a Fabian, and he was in there at the time. Hey, we didn't know. We didn't have the internet. We weren't sharing information like this. And he, I mean, he may have read, I've got the Lima Declaration here, it looks pretty kosher to me, you know, it looks pretty fair. He's like, yeah, okay, that seems fair. I'll just sign away. And what that turned into is the Australia Act in 1986, which was a referendum of requirement which was omitted. So Bob Hawke, he was a Fabian statement. He said, well, you got to wait and then you got to strike hard. And Kim Beazley in 1990, he had a statement which was, the United Nations has given federal government a mandate of ownership for housing, farms, property, and business to government control once a republic has been proclaimed. That should frighten the hell out of you. If the Lima Declaration looks good, that one doesn't. And And where's that one going to go? Now, the referendum of the public, which is 1999, which is handing over the crown to the UN, apparently. In November 1999, the constitutional referendum, that's right, they asked the public if we want to become a republic and change the constitution to get away from the crown, remember? And we said, no, we want to keep it with the crown, but they did it anyway. 2 months before that, in October, the UN had already voted it in. So in May 2000, an oath of allegiance out of the Legal Practices Act in Victoria means that lawyers were not acting in allegiance to the Crown. So the Crown had been removed in 1999 and replaced with obligations to the United Nations. That happened 25 years after the Lima Declaration was signed. And that in turn moved further into our loss of national ownership. So borrowing from international banks and ownership from global investors, farming to be sold to overseas investors, banking to be sold to international corporations, national governments to increase borrowing from central banks and to facilitate their agendas, publicly owned and government-run enterprises and utilities sold to transnational corporations, producing for exporting for foreign consumption and importing for local consumption, abolish protection for locally owned farms, handing over control of our natural resources, adopt policies of multiculturalism which eliminates national borders, culture and identity to create global citizens. Wow. So what happened there is we've got no national industry, no exports that are Australian owned, and therefore we don't have a GDP. Because basically we don't manufacture anything. We've got nothing left. We've got a bit of coal left, and our ports are on a 99-year lease to China. Our Newcastle port is 50% owned by China, and the other 50% is basically by superannuation and other investors, which they're not telling about, which is probably just more BlackRock and Vanguard anyway. So because we don't produce anything, that's how we got into this 1.3, where we got into $300 billion debt, because and you see that, as I said before, when Rudd got in, our borrowing just went through the roof. We don't own anything, so they say that they're bringing in all this money from all this money and spreading it amongst the people and saying that's stimulus to the economy. It's not. It's just spending and just being more in debt for the sake of moving money around. And those financial institutions are coming from the International Monetary Fund, from the Rockefellers, from the World Bank. And that brings me to economic hitmen. So economic hitmen is when you go to a country like, say, Papua New Guinea, and you say, okay, you're a third world country. I'm the World Bank, so I've got basically unlimited money because I just basically print it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give your money, billions of dollars over a certain period of time, and you can line your back pockets if you like, and with that money I want you to build infrastructure. So put your people to work, that gives them all a job, and they can build their houses and they can be happy, and we'll just keep on lending you this money, and then you can be like the rest of the world, you can be a first world nation. Some of the people object to that, so the people that are from World Bank, they have to be careful when they enter that country, because they know that what they're doing is they're putting that country in debt indefinitely. They'll never get out of it. And so, the politicians say yes because they're lining their pockets, and they're giving themselves a pay rise while they're shaking hands with the people from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. But hey, they get a nice new a nice new rail lines and train lines and ports and all that sort of stuff. And why the World Bank wanting to do that and lend so much money to them? Well, basically they print it so it's fine for them, but they're extremely resource rich country. Can we put a mine in there? Can we put a military base in there? Yeah, sure. Well, you're going to have to anyway because we own you the money and basically we own you now. So it's not like they want their money back, they just want that ownership. And so the same with Australia, where we're if we got rid of the banks, we're self-sufficient, we can live here by ourselves, we've got everything we need in order to manufacture everything we need. but we're a resource-rich nation, and they want it. So we don't own anything anymore. And this has come from the UN document being the Lima Declaration. Now, the United Nations, basically, it was a charter based on the Constitution of Soviet Russia signed in 1943. And Soviet nationalists under the Secretary of Security Council, which means that a lot of the people that ran the UN when it began, all the way up into 1988, were Soviet nationalists. So those people that built the UN are communists. And so the United Nations, it has all different arms like UNESCO, the WHO, the World Bank, UNICEF. It's all basically part of the big group, and us as little individuals, we're not part of their big gang. The UNESCO is United Nations education system. It's destruction of love and country, reduces patriotism, and their sex education is of their beliefs. The WHO is the health arm of them, which is creating advices for administration to and creating health obligations from the Western countries to, and that's basically what all these signed declarations are. They're basically obligations that we have to oblige to, and it's basically a box ticking thing. And the thing is we give money to the United Nations in order to be a member of them, and they're supposed to look after us. Well, they are looking after us, but in a way of a socialist agenda, not one of a democracy. And then you have the World Bank, which provides funding to support developing countries, loans third world countries billions of dollars for infrastructure and aid. You have UNICEF, which is a philanthropy arm, which is basically them getting their tentacles into places like Africa and South Asia, and providing aid to the underprivileged. So all these, so the United Nations and the way that it is formed and the decisions come from, they want control over the population. They favour corporatism, and they also favour big government and communism. So on the western side of the world, you have the big corporations looking over government, and in the eastern side of the world, you have big government looking over the people. And basically, they're one and the same, basically, and they want to bring that model here more and more. And all the people who promote that kind of ideology on the realm of society all go to Davos. Now, Davos is a big forum where rich people go and pay big membership to be a part of and put their 2 cents worth in as to how to run the world. And so you've got your World Economic Forum there, you've got all your high members of society, all your corporatists there, you know, you've got your UK family there. Looks like the Vatican's there. You got all your bankers are there, and they're all basically deciding how to run the world going forward. Now, and that brings you down all the way down to the Great Reset, which comes from Klaus Schwab and his World Economic Forum. Where am I going to go from here? So that takes us from the past and showing us how we're going to mix show how the past is going to relive itself again, and how communism is coming again into the future. Now, they're coming into the future again through, I'll repeat it once again, through a social credit system, which means that all our identity is in one place, and it takes us into it takes us into the fourth industrial revolution. So our first industrial revolution was mechanics, which was steam and turbines, and that was from somewhere in 1760 to 1840. And so that got the world moving in a much faster pace. And after that, we had the second industrial revolution, which was electricity, mass production, and factories. And that was from about 1870 to about 1940. And then we had the World War II. Now, the World War II, that sped up that second industrial revolution because all war increases technology. And then From that, we had the third industrial revolution, which was computers and automation in the 1970s. And now we're going to go into the fourth industrial revolution, which is connectivity of all things, which is the Internet of Things, the mapping of the world, which is transhumanism, and that's happening now. And what that is that basically we have the whole world here, and in it we have every house, every car, every computer, and at the moment some of it's mapped, but some of it isn't. And what they want to do is, in these massive clouds, they have these massive servers which are in the cold parts of the world to keep the computers cold. They have these massive maps. I mean, you can see if you go onto Google Maps, I mean, that's just part of it. But they have, you know, think of Amnesty. You know, Amnesty, where you put in your details and you see who your forefathers were and all that sort of stuff. That's not just for us. That's for them to map the world. And that's also what they're doing with these nasal swabs, is they're collecting data, and they're collecting the DNA data from that, and they're basically making a map. They're knowing exactly where our DNA strong points are and where they aren't, and where these kind of people are living in the world, and how they're and in what localities they're at. That's why you see a lot more censuses these days, is because they're trying to get a massive map of the world in their computer model. And that's why they're getting us to sign in and track us, and that's why they have these tracking apps, because they just basically want this big computer model so they can sit there in their room and just basically have a look at everything and pull it all apart, because they don't get out in society. They're basically just there behind their desk, just like I am now, and they want to be able to pull the strings as they see fit. They have 5G and 6G and this the cloud technology, and this is all basically surveillance. So 5G and 6G, what that is that basically, and the Internet of Things, is that basically means that everything is connected to everything else. So they need them within close proximity to be able to have that latency where everything can be tracked. So it's a massive thing. If you think about logistics, you have to get the goods from one part of the world to another part of the world. So all the way from the factory into the shipping container, from the shipping container to the distributor, into the distributor to the shops, from the shops from the consumer, and the consumer all the way to the house, and then inside their home. So if you want to track a good, you know, you have consignment notes and things like that, where you track, you know, your parcel from China, let's say, all the way along the shipping route and all the way, and it comes to your house, and the payment for that. Now, in the future, they have these little chips, and these little chips are in every single thing, and it's very cheap. It's manufactured, but it comes with a little number. The little number gets charged up. The little chip gets charged up from the 5 or the 6G with enough bandwidth there to be able to give enough charge, so it sends information back and gives it its number, its identity that it wants to know what it is. Okay, the 5G knows exactly where it is. Now that doesn't just finish when it gets off the shipping container into this distribution center, and it doesn't just finish from there when it gets from there to the supermarket. It follows you all the way home. So, and could you imagine the IT behind that and how much money they're going to save? Can you imagine that they don't need us anymore when they have this? So we've built this whole world for them on the backs of and we've built this whole world for them, and then they don't need us anymore. It's just so ironic. And it's what any business person does. Then it's like, okay, build my company for you and then see you later. And so imagine you got your passport, or you've got your chip underneath your skin. You walk into the shopping mall or the shopping center. You don't have to pay for parking because it comes out automatically. You can see that they're already scanning your number plate, and then you don't have to open the gate and put your ticket on the way in. It just knows how long you've been there for. When you go on a motorway, it knows when you got on and got off, and it can calculate exactly how much you owe. And imagine going into the supermarket now and just filling up your trolley and just walking straight out. You don't pay for it. There's no one there. It knows you can't steal anything. So this technology is going to get rid of a lot of crime. But you know, that just comes straight off your central bank digital currency. It just comes straight out of it. It just comes, and if you choose something that has carbon credits on it, then you're going to get taxed for that. It's going to cost you more. And it doesn't take you, it follows you in your car, which everything that is made will have a little chip on it. And that's its little identity, everything, you know, from a phone cover to the phone, you know, everything, including you. And so everything is an object, and every object is mapped. And so they're able to see all that as well. They're able to see where everything is. And if anything's out of place, it's going to red flag it. And so it's hard to hide, you know. I mean, they can tell your identity by the shape of your ears, you know. They don't. You can have your eyeball, yeah, but if you put sunglasses on, they can still see your ears. You put a hat on, they can still tell how you are by the way you walk, and that's just for now. But soon, with the chip there, you know, they're just, well, if you don't have it, you can't buy or sell, and you're out there shitting over the edge of a log because you got no toilet because you can't afford one, because you can't buy one. So you're out with the bears. So this mapping system doesn't just finish when you get home. You know, you've got the Internet of Things, which is a massive technology where your computer talks to your kettle, and you know, you could be driving down the street and it's all there for convenience. That's the marketing ploy. It's all there for convenience. So you can be driving down in your Tesla car and the chip in your body knows that you like a coffee at this time, so it starts making it for you, and at that absolute perfect timing for you to get home and your coffee's there, you know, yay. You know, and this all comes into the smart cities, you know. So everything, you know, you can summon your car now, and this great reset where no one owns anything, everyone starts renting everything. So you can see that with Elon Musk. He is the pioneer of the fourth industrial revolution. Make no mistake, he comes across as a good guy trying to ride the tiger of AI, saying that he's keeping in control, but no, he is the fourth industrial revolutionist, and he is a very, very clever man with all the ideas that the communists want. Okay, so all the ideas that he has in his head, they love those ideas, and it just so happened to be a match made in heaven that he's able to find his place in society where all the doors have been opened for him. I mean, he's a great guy. I mean, he's a great guy in the real term of the word great, but he wouldn't have got to where he was if his ideas hadn't aligned with the ideas of the people who run the world, which are those type of people that attend Davos. And I know that he tends to oppose them with his Bitcoin, with him advocating Bitcoin and whatnot, but I don't believe him. Now, he definitely is that pioneer, and I mean, he's got the largest surveillance technology in the world. I mean, think about all the cars that are on, all the cameras that are on all those cars, just filming society and the public without them even knowing. You see a Tesla car and you're being filmed, and all that's getting uploaded into the data, into the big cloud. You know, and that's basically what the 5G and the 6G is basically to know where you are at any given time. Now he has got the idea. I mean, you can't buy any of his solar paneled roofing. He's renting them all, and you know, in the future, you probably won't be able to buy a Tesla. You'll probably only be able to lease one. And so he's already on the idea of on the term or the UBI, and it just comes out of your universal basic income. That's if you're alive by that stage. He's into quantum computing. He's into Neuralink. He's into biotechnology and integration into transhumanism, which has got to do with the Neuralink, which is the integration of technology into our biology. He's into mRNA. He reckons that with mRNA, you've got the technology to turn someone into a butterfly, reduce aging, reverse aging even. He says that with just a few tweaks, he's not too far away. He's got constant surveillance in his cars. He's got Starlink. He's got self-driving cars, and he's into AI. Now, if this guy, if you watch him and you look into him, he's always acted as though money's been no issue. And I think because money has never been an issue, I mean, his company is worth, his Tesla company is worth more than every other car company combined. And it's still in debt, still only been making money for, a few years. But it's worth more than Ford. It's worth more than Ford and Chevy. It's worth more than every other single car company combined. It's only been profitable for a couple of years and not even that profitable. But he's got the future. And so if it was only due to his own ability, he wouldn't be where he is now. He'd be somewhere good like Silicon Valley doing awesome things, but he wouldn't be flying rockets to Mars. It's because they said to him, they gave him the green light, I reckon. They gave him the green light saying, you can do whatever you want. You got the green light and you can do whatever you want. And if you want to go to Mars, you can go to Mars. And there's something in that too, which when you think about Mars, you think about the future of humanity, and it doesn't sound great. So yeah, that's Elon Musk and his SpaceX company, but he also has the Boring Company as well, which is basically an underground tunnel system. And so they're creating this transport system for these smart cities. And it's all, once again, it's all connected in there. You've got your self-driving cars, which work within the Boring system. And the 5G is able to work within the realms of the of the central AI system, and being able to make them all connect with each other. Now, these smart driving cars, they're going to be so fast that they probably won't have windows, because once everything works on that integrated system, they can just weave in and out of each other, and basically you get to your destination in no time while you're on your laptop. Now, the business to be in, I would think, would to be the one which you have a fleet of cars, like a fleet of taxis, and because everything in the future is going to be like a fleet of Ubers. So our kids might not even get to have driver's license, because they're not going to need them. Basically, they'll just book an Uber. So once again, no one's going to own a car. I mean, why would you own a car if you don't need one? And it's all part of this robot city in these smart cities. And so what they're trying to do is to herd us all into these cities, and they're called smart cities. And they began one in Canada, which was basically a test city, and actually the Canadian people actually pulled that down and said, we don't want to have it here, but Google was going to start a smart city in Toronto. But basically, it's that same kind of system where everything is systemized. And Elon Musk is, once again, he's a pioneer of that. And I think he's trying to make his own micronation, so therefore he can have his own little test city in there without any regulations and anyone opposing him. So this Boring city, this Boring Company, which is basically underground tunnels, so you can get from place to place really quick. You rent all your appliances, and it's basically having robots everywhere. And this robot future is so integrated that there's going to be a massive loss of labour. Now, with the testing for these self-driving cars, I think they're testing them in Australia now. Once the trucking industry comes in and they have self-driving trucks, that's a massive industry collapse, because that's a bunch of workers that have been driving their whole life, and then once they bring that in, then I mean, you can't re-educate these people. You can't re-educate them into doing some sort of IT work, because it's just not going to work for people that are over 50. They've been driving all their life, and And so once I think they're holding off. I think they've got the technology, and I think that they've got the factories in order to bring these trucking systems out, but they can't afford to bring these self-driving trucks yet, because that's just going to crash everything. I mean, if I was a trucking company, that means that I could have these self-driving, self-refueling, no need to stop, 24 hours a day trucks which that just continuously go, and as well as a taxi system that continuously goes. And so you don't need any, you need a lot less insurance. They're much safer, obviously, and you don't need any stops. And so I think what they're doing here is they're trying to test like a triage system as to whether, when the truck has to hit somebody, whether it hits the child first, whether it hits a mother first, whether it hits the pensioner first. So it's going to identify the other user or the other object, whether it's a kid on a bike, or whether it's a trolley, or whether it's a kangaroo, and whether to hit it and keep going, or whether to derail the whole cargo in order to to save somebody's life. So I think that's sort of like the AI's test is, and I think they are testing them out in Australia to recognise the difference between a kangaroo and a person. And so, I mean, you're not going to derail the whole thing from a kangaroo. I mean, the whole industry will be over, and there won't be any more self-driving trucks, because no one's going to buy them. But if the truck can hit the kangaroo and keep on going, then the robots win over the humans. So you have them all coming into these smart cities, and where everything is basically tracked. They say in the fourth industrial revolution that they're even going to track your dreams and all your thoughts, and there's basically going to be no privacy, but it's going to be for your benefit. Now, that goes into more of so the future is going to be a fourth industrial revolution of surveillance with robots, and there's not really much of a need for 7 billion people on the planet. There's no need for that. So, and what you're going to have is a massive, and it brings us back to the climate change issue. It brings us back to a socialist agenda, where the equality comes in and the climate change comes in. So climate change, which is an Agenda 21, Agenda 30, Club of Rome agenda, where it says there's a problem with the world, with an ever-increasing demand of resources and an ever-increasing population, and they think that we're going to run out of resources and our population is going to get so big that that the world can't contain it. And it's just a massive lie. If anyone's ever flown over the planet, you can see that we're not really populating much of the planet, and it's all false. And they have like a big climate warming fiasco going on to say that all the reason why the climate is rising is because of the humans that are on it. But the more carbon we pull out of the ground and put into the air, the more greener we make it, because we're all made of carbon. We're carbon-based life. And so the bushfires that happened in 2019 just basically went off and made the oceans much, much, much greener. And greenery is supposed to be they're supposed to be greenies. So, and you'll find that 70% of the carbon that is released into the atmosphere is from decaying trees. So when they die, they're made of carbon, and when they die, they decompose and they release the carbon, and that's where a lot of the carbon is coming from. But to think that we can't live with a higher carbon count is just basically a lie. I mean, they've been calling on this climate fiasco with climate change for a long time now. Like when I was a kid, and basically I haven't seen the weather change at all. It's still, birds are chirping out there. Now there is a massive problem with pollution, and when we divide up our national parks, and when we spoil the waterways and our seas and overfish the oceans, that's a massive problem. But what these guys have done is they've taken a problem and they've made it into their issue, and they've turned it into an idea where they think that the whole world's going to flood, and it's just a massive lie. And they say that, you know, that if we get rid of this species, then we're all going to die, and it's basically a lie. They've made it into a point where every government has an obligation in order to oblige to, in order to make it so the world doesn't collapse underwater. And you know, these people are still buying properties on the coastal line. The coastal line hasn't changed. You can still go for a boat ride through Venice. You know, under the tunnels, the seas haven't risen. It's a massive lie. But they've made it into a problem that is so large that it cannot be solved with smaller governments alone. There has to be a global governance there. So that's why the United Nations have come in with their Paris Agreement, and basically they've got other countries to sign on, and it's basically a socialist agenda. So they're going to change. They're going to fix climate change with socialism, and once again, it's a collective for the greater of all good idea. And if I can bring it up here, I'll bring up their goals. Oh, I don't have it. So yeah, but basically they have the Agenda 21, which is basically a sustainable development goals, and it's part of the new international economic order, whereas everything is for the idea of keeping the environment the way it is and at our expense. And they're pointing the finger at capitalism and consumerism, and they think that we're going to run out of fuel, they think that we're going to run out of oil, they think we're going to run out of resources, but the resources they're renewing themselves, and and how many mines we've got is just, we could make 10, 100 times more mines, and we're not going to run out. I mean, where's the stuff? We send some of it out into outer space, but what they're talking about is that this stuff just it just evaporates into thin air, and we use it all up, and it's gone. But I believe them to a certain degree, but not to the degree that they're making it out as though if we don't go with their plan, then we're all going to drown in 10 years. If it was up to what they said, we'd already all be dead. And I'm just looking out of the beautiful blue sky at the moment. And so with the Agenda 30, they've got like a restructuring of the world, and the Agenda 2030 is basically it's an idea for the year 2030. So this whole revolution of the world, this whole discursive shift, which is under the guise of a better world, of a new normal, is to come in by 2030. So by 2030, they have this Agenda 30 where basically they want everyone to be renting everything. They want everyone in smart cities. They want everybody to be a vegetarian. That's why you're seeing all these vegan propaganda in your Netflix or left flicks. And you see people, they're so worried about killing cows in order to eat, and they're making us feel so guilty of it. And I wonder why, because they're sending all our beef overseas because we don't even eat those industries anymore. So they're trying to make us vegetarian so the Chinese can eat it instead, So, but basically there's not any vegans in China, is there? So they're trying to get us to feel so guilty for the people who we are, and that's an anti-human movement. And it's not a new movement, but it is one that is supposed to get on the side of the greenies, of the people who love nature, the people who love animals. So if you love your dog, then you probably hate humans. Get on our side. Don't eat meat. you know, you can do better through vegetarian. Like, I've made 1 million diets for my people. I made hundreds, thousands of diets, and I know the difference between making a diet for somebody with meat in it and vegetarian, and I've made a lot of vegan diets too, and I've seen the difference, and the difference is massive. It's not in favor of the vegan. I mean, with veganism alone, you know, you're lacking the saturated fats. And I think, psychologically, I think a lot of people who are anorexic hide behind the guise of veganism just so they can not eat that. But basically, it's an anti-human cult, it's an anti-human movement, and they're trying to get subscribers. Basically, another one for Agenda 30 is poverty. So when they talk about poverty, just think about them stealing from first world countries such as Australia, and that goes with the Lima Declaration and the equality of countries. With their critical race theory, they have that in there too. So basically, it's a white male-hating agenda, and basically all the colonials, all the white colonials are to be demonized, and basically the same as what I said before in the communist goals is to give back to the native people, even if they're not ready to self-govern. So, look, hey, there's devil in its due in that as well. I suppose the white people did come in here and push them aside, and I suppose now what the United Nations is trying to do is they're trying to get on the side of these original custodians, they call them, or the Aboriginals, I mean, and they are making these Aboriginals think that the United Nations are going to treat them better than the white colonials did. And so that's why they're trying to get everyone into that critical race theory. And because they think that the UN is going to save their country. But it's anything but. You know, we're the way that the Commonwealth came here and, you know, expanded their colonialism here is going to look like, you know, a saving grace compared to what the communists are going to do to them. So, you know, that's that. Now, there's feminism in there as well, and there's also a lot of tax. So we're going to tax you as well. And so this is a socialist progressive movement. It's self-defeating. You find there's so much censorship and there's so many rights and responsibilities that they'll end up attacking each other. But what this does come down to is it comes down to regulation. Now, the regulation works into the economy, and the economy feeds, takes away from this Western world. Now, I want to get into the future. How am I going to get in there? How am I going to get into the future from here? Well, one thing I did want to get from is Big Pharma's got a lot, you know, we borrowed the money, then we gave the money to Big Pharma. Now, if we go into adverse reactions, the DAEN, the VAERS, now you can't actually get in there anymore because they said that they've had too much internet activity trying to get into the DAEN that they've shut them out now, which is just absolutely ridiculous. I was going on the DAEN, which is a database of adverse event notifications daily when I could, and the amount of deaths that were jumping up per day had gone from 77 in a matter of 6 weeks to 87 in a matter of 6 weeks and 1 day, and it started climbing from there, and that's just in Australia. Now, it's a massive issue which, you know, just from anecdotal evidence coming from the people I know, there's something in this vaccine which is, it's not good. and the data's not sufficient to say whether this stuff's safe or not. Look, I've never heard of an mRNA before, but for a brand new technology, you're not going to be the. This thing is a worldwide trial. It comes back with a lot of data. I do not trust it. Now, before anyone else seemed to have said infertility, I said infertility, and what do you know? Infertility is everywhere because, you know, if you look into a lot of Bill Gates' videos, and with it coming straight from the horse's mouth himself, he wants to reduce population, and you have a look at his models, and you have a look at if he makes the world healthier, then everyone from Elon Musk to the people that are in the Davos, they're all expecting a reduction in population, but I don't buy their claims as to how that's going to happen. I don't think that if you make, you know, the people in Africa healthy, then they'll try to have less children because they've got healthier younger children. There's been too many, there's been a flood of events from what happens with vaccines over the years, and now with there's like, I don't have to tell you on this video. There's plenty of other videos that tell you how bad vaccines are, but for me, I mean, if I wanted to depopulate the world, I'd make it a slow one that is, you can't really blame it, and that will come through infertility. I don't know what else it has in immediate effects, whether, you know, it's causing these clots and whatnot. Obviously it is, but infertility would be one that which I would think, if I wanted to depopulate the world, and bring it down to 500,000, then infertility would be the case, the way to do it, which is a depopulation regime. Now, if this happens and people do start dying, then, and we haven't got those self-driving trucks coming in yet, then there's going to be gaps in labour. And I think that you're already starting to see that with the truck drivers in the UK. There's going to be labour shortages, and there's going to be a global food chain and industry collapse. Now, this is an issue because this brings another reason why they need to bring in what they're going to bring in. Now, we've all been worried about camps, about forced vaccination, forced vaccination camps, and forced re-education camps. And if people are dying on the short term, and I know people that have died and had these adverse reactions and got very sick, there's been countless amounts, then there's going to be a labour shortage. So there's going to be gaps in industries, and if at the moment they're denying it because you can't see it so much, and then if it does come out in a couple of years that, yeah, okay, there's gaps, there's definitely gaps in the supply chain somewhere, you know, whether it's food or petrol or oil or, you know, in the shipping or in postage or whatever. If they say that there's gaps there, then it can come to conscription. And so if they get everybody on with these digital IDs, and they say, look, you know, when there's another worldwide pandemic, and that could be a pandemic of it could be an epidemic of labour shortages. So they might conscript people and say, okay, well, we need you for this job, we need you to bridge this gap. And while you're there, we'll vaccinate at the same time. And if there's anyone against the government, hey, look, this issue is so big, people are dying of food here, because and they might just deliberately, you know, if they've got a thing called collectivization where they're privatizing you can't have a private farm, then you don't know. You know, we're all locked down in our houses. We don't know what's happening on the other side of the world. We already don't know what's happening in China because they're not telling us. They have a great firewall there. And if we're all contained within our LGAs, we don't really know what's going on overseas, do we? You know, we only know what the news is telling us. And if they start shutting down parts of our internet, then we won't know either. And that leads on to another another hypothesis as to what could happen in the future. But if they tell us that there's a food shortage, then it definitely does look like communist Russia in the last century, and then we'll get conscripted forced labour because there's a shortage. So you've got shortage on one side, and then you've got robots on the other side, and so in this you've lost your choices. And so if you've ever read that book 1984, I think that's what you're going to start seeing now is, and this could be a long shot here, but I don't believe that the East and West, I don't think that I think the East and West conflict, I think that's false. I think they're more in agreement than they are in disagreement. I don't think there's going to be a World War III in the terms of, everyone's going to blow everyone up, because they say they're either going to it's going to happen by consent or by conflict. And I don't think the conflict is going to happen. I think it's going to happen via consent. But they're not going to tell us that. I think if you've read the Three Worlds of 1984, you had the Oceania, you had the Asia, and then you had the Europe, and they were all at constant war with each other, and you never saw the other side because they're at war with them. So the world was divided up into three parts, and that could happen with the world today. They could say, okay, well, we're going to go to war with China, and in the seas, in the Pacific Oceans and the Atlantic, we're fighting there, and there's always a push and a shove, so they retreat a bit, and then we're winning, and then they pushed us back, and there's going to be always a reason for us to have that perpetual war in order for us to keep on making things and keep us with purpose. It gives us purpose that we're in this war for something. And I don't think, we've had a lot of fake wars or a lot of wars that they tell us one reason, and well, if they're going to have a world war, then I think it's going to be one where that we're going to all be cut off from each other. And I think that that could be happening now in the midst of it. I think this Australian this investigation into China, I don't believe Scott Morrison. So if I don't believe Scott Morrison, and he's having this Chinese intervention, and it is trying to investigate them and the regions of Wuhan and the use of 5G and rejecting them for that. It seems like a slow escalation into a war, and a Cold War at first, and then probably like a larger war later. But I don't think behind all the scenes that's going to be a real one. Now, that's something to think about. And lastly, to finish off, I wanted to talk about how this has come about in the terms of us as a culture. So, and this is basically a balance of chaos and order. So, historically, we came from order, which was basically in the Western world. It came from a Christian heritage, where we believe there's a God, and God is looking over upon us, and therefore we should behave. And in all the different pockets of the world, you might have your Western world, and you might have your different denomination of religions. So you might have your Church of England over here, you have your Pentecost over here, and in their own little pockets of the world, they're okay, because they've got a culture which works because everyone subscribes to it. Well, not everyone, but the majority of people. And but what happens is when they invented planes and mass transport, is they started getting cultures mixed all around the world. And so your Indian culture to your Jewish culture, to all the different little subcultures and all your tribes, and in the beginning it was sort of like they were sort of cult-like, and a cult is sort of like a lot of rings stacked up on top of each other, and all those rings are types of people, and they all believe the same thing. So a cult would be like a bunch of rings stacked on top of each other. And what happens when you inject, you just say you have immigration, and you bring someone in with a new idea, it seems to break, some people might subscribe to that idea, and it breaks the cult apart. And so you don't have a cult anymore, you have a culture. And so a culture is like all different rings. They still interlap with each other, but they don't, not necessarily one person agrees 100% with as the next person. And so, well, we all sort of agree with each other, we treat others as we treat each other as we treat ourselves. And we had that back in the 80s where, we'd have a routine, and, we were pretty Aussie. And then the immigration came, and what happens with the immigration is you have all these different cultures, and they're all mixing. You have this thing called multiculturalism, and then we had a thing turning from the White Australia policy into official multiculturalism. So with more immigration and more multiculturalism leads to the loss of sovereignty and cultural identity. And so, because you have all these other cultures in the mix, which is cool, but it does have its downsides. And I think that the psychology of the downsides is that they're playing it into their favor, where and I think that was a breakdown of religion. So in the 60s, there was a massive rebellion against religion. They say, okay, we don't believe in it anymore. The Beatles especially, imagine there's no heaven, no hell below. And basically everything that came with the church was thrown out. And they do what they call throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So anything that was good with the religions, they threw out as well, because I believe that the religions were infiltrated by Satanists. I think that they were infiltrated by bad people. I mean, if I was a pedophile, I would look to find myself in the place where I could be the most trusted. So I'm a psychopath, so I wouldn't have any feelings, but I would not tell anybody, because I know from a young age, that I'm going to, if I tell somebody, they're going to lock me up. Everyone's telling me it's wrong. So, you hold those feelings to yourself, and basically, that you're an outcast of society. So basically, you would hold back those, and you would imitate what the world wants you to think, and then you would infiltrate those child-minding groups. You would infiltrate the churches, and you'll get close, and you'll say whatever you need to say in order to get in there. And that's basically how it works. Now, the best thing that can happen to a pedophile, for the pedophile, is to get caught, because as soon as they get caught, they go to court, they get charged or whatever, and as soon as they come out, they get recognised by the other pedophiles, and the other pedophiles say, hey, I know what you did in there. I mean, we're all part of a big group, and welcome to the group. And then they come into this big group, and and then they're on the dark web looking for porn and all that sort of stuff. So that's the way the infiltration works. But I should probably delete that part out. But anyway, what it is the basis of truth. The basis of truth that we derive from the religion or from the Christian foundations has lost its foundation. We've basically said, okay, so if we don't have a footing there, if we don't have a foundation, then we're basically ready to believe anything. And so that's where existentialism comes in. So now they're trying to say that we're so small, we're so useless. We're on this little planet right in the middle of the universe. The universe is so big, and nothing that you do is significant. So you are so insignificant, so it doesn't even matter. I mean, that's why suicide happens so much more now, is because there's no purpose, there's no God's will to follow. It's basically a nihilistic approach. It's basically existentialism, and that is and that is the nothingness that comes from the socialists and the communists. It's basically the emperor or the dictator has taken role of God, and basically you're to serve them, and if there's none of that, then basically there's nothing. So why live? And so with that existentialism, that's that divide and conquer. So I mean, they've brought in a religion of freedom, and a freedom of religion, and with that, if you break down the culture and there's no more "should be right, mate," there's no more Aussiness because it's been broken, then I might not believe as the same as the next person. I might not have that group mentality. And everyone's in it for themselves, and that's why you're seeing a lot of divorce now, is because it's like, oh well, I divorced him because I didn't feel good and it wasn't right for me, and that family unit is not you before me. That's not there anymore. It's just basically I don't deserve that, and I need to get out regardless, and so it's much easier to divorce now. Not to say that you guys don't have your reasons, but all I'm saying is a divorce now is much more than what it was before. And as well with the communist model, the promiscuity is normal. So it's more about acting like animals, and debauchery is entertained and promoted. Selfishness and narcissism is on the rise, and people are thinking of themselves rather than they're thinking about somebody else. And so when you talk about where we came from, where our life is not about us, and that's not discussed anymore. It's more about the pursuit of happiness for yourself. And so that's a religion that's been replaced. It's been replaced with the pursuit of happiness rather than the pursuit of following God's will, and rather than the pursuit of serving another, And so, yes, you've got high rates of suicides, you've got fathers that are stripped of the rights to see the children, you see basically a social order. So with these rings that once were stacked on top of each other like a cult, that's what you call order. Yeah, so they had a culture order. Then it was broken out into a culture, and then from a culture into existentialism. Now, existentialism was where none of the rings touch. It's like, I believe whatever I believe, and you can stay over there. Yeah, and basically what that is you turn him further into chaos. And so this happens over time. You have order and chaos. So you break it up into a structure that is so rigid that you can't move and you can't have any individualism. And then basically you break it so everyone has their individualism. And then what that turns into, if you go too far, then you start acting like animals again, and where there's no basis for your morals. And so that's what's happening now in society, is we're moving back into chaos again. And so where you have, Christians or Muslims or Jews, they would look at our culture at the moment and say, oh, look at them, look how, they have no morals, they're divorcing, look at them, that doesn't like their system doesn't work. And so that's what, and so they broke the old order, or the old Christian order, that says, oh, look, there is no God. And they broke the culture with it. And so when they break it, and then they had to break it in order to construct a new social order. A new social order is what they're bringing in, and that new social order is that climate change, leftism, and they thought that they were going to succeed with that. They thought that the world was going to subscribe to that idea, but we've seen through it. And you'll see a lot of Christians on the rise now, a lot of Jews on the rise, saying, okay, well, our order actually works, and your existential ideologies and your narcissism and your absurdisms, basically that's we don't want a part of it. And so people are coming together now and finding a reason to come together. And it's quite a beautiful thing to see people reunite with their purpose, with their individualism, and they're not going to get, we've seen through them. So in the future, there's going to be two civilizations. There's going to be a civilization of those who are on the grid, those who have transhumanism, and transhumanism is where, you know, your mind, with Elon Musk, you have Neuralink, where you've got a chip in your brain, and that's connected to the grid. You know, you shut your eyeballs and you'll be able to ring Matt, you know what I mean? And that's right there. You know, that's what they want with this mRNA. That's part of their transhumanism thing as well, where us and robots are intertwined. They want to kill off our existing, you know, breeding system of having sex. They want to get rid of that, and they want to say, okay, we don't have a sexual identity. They probably just want us to be artificial insemination. That's probably what they want for the future. You know, they want us connected up to Neuralink. So Neuralink, so you have a chip in your brain, and that's connected to Starlink, Elon Musk Starlink, which is basically a big net over the world of the internet. Now remember, the internet's going to be free. The internet's going to be free, so you can't pay for it. But you can only get onto the internet if you have that passport, remember? So if you can't get on that passport, then you can't get into the internet. If you can't get into the internet, then you can't get into your cryptocurrency. And so with the future currencies for the resistant, yeah, we might be able to have our own internet. We might be able to have our own crypto. And that's one thing. With crypto, you need miners, you need electricity, you need internet, and you need to be able to purchase it. And any one of those things could be taken away from us. So it makes it a little bit of a risky thing. But if we could manage to have all those things, then that would be the choice currency for those who aren't going to live on their grid. So we're going to have to start creating our own grid, which I think someone's calling it a parallel society. So, and I think even in the Great Reset, they're saying, okay, well, there's going to be people that don't live on this grid, and we're going to have to be exiled. Now, you have to watch out for people who are exiled, because people that are exiled and survive become very clever and very strong, and they don't trust anyone. They stick together. So they're going to want to try and kill us. They're not going to just let us live out there. They're going to send their drones and whatnot, their police drones, and find us because we don't take the chip and we don't get vaccinated, and we're not under the radar. So we're going to probably actually start wearing tinfoil hats so the satellites can't see our ears. But yeah, we're going to probably see more micronations pop up. We're going to be wanderers, no fixed address. We're going to own little possessions, and we're going to be the hackers. So we're going to be hackers. We're going to be pretty mobile. We're probably not going to own much, because, you know, the more you own, the easier you're going to be found, and it weighs you down. But, you know, they're going to take our farms off us if they get their way, and they're going to come pretty strong too. But the currency that's seen us through age after age is gold and silver. You know, it's physical, you know, so it's going to be crypto, gold, livestock as well. Now there's going to be a food shortage, so livestock is, you know, a chicken's a chicken. It doesn't go down in value. It's probably actually going to increase in value. So, you know, livestock is going to be the trade, you know, it's going to be, you know, that same old thing, you know, $5 for a carton of eggs. I don't know, $5, so it's going to be like a barter trade system out there. There's going to be a lot of barter. There's going to be in micronations with wanderers with no fixed address and little possessions, but they're hackers. Now the hackers, you'll never find a hacker because they don't expose themselves, but whew, you know, it all comes down to these hackers. These hackers they're going to be the ones. They're going to be the ones that are going to blow a lot of shit up, and God bless them. But yeah, gold is what you want. You want gold. You want gold bullion. It's always going to be there. After all this is over, when we win, depends on how bad it gets. You know, gold is going to be the one that's going to stay there. I wouldn't trust real estate. because they're taking our land entitlement deeds away. They're actually, they've actually told them we might as well burn them. Gold is what you want. That's gold, livestock. I mean, I'm not too sure about crypto. If we can make it survive and if we can have our internet not turned off, then sweet. Crypto is going to be the number one. And then also barter. So that's the future. Doesn't look too great for us. You don't want to live in a smart city. You got to live in our own little parallel society. And this is basically a warfare which happens every 100 years. It's a spiritual war. And with the lack of religion, we've lost our rituals. We lost our rituals. We lose our connection to our pineal gland. We've been so consumed with fixating on the frontal lobes and developing that for the last few hundred years that we've forgotten our rituals. And there's a connection there, and they're trying to make us forget that there's a connection there. There's something else there. We're on this world for something bigger than what we can understand. We're not just here in a trillion chance on this earth with absolutely no reason. We're obviously there for a higher purpose, and we're here to figure out what that is. But basically, I think it's a spiritual war. I think there's good and evil, and I think on a higher level where we've been at war, I don't think, they're trying to make it go for the pursuit of happiness, but it's pursuit of meaning. That's what we're really here for. I don't think this life is meant for comfort. I think it's a series of tests, and you get to choose to sell out at any time you want. You go for it, you sell out. If I want to sell out, I would have been rich and famous a long time ago, but I chose not to, and I can't. There's something in me that just can't. So, that's a choice I've made. But yeah, I don't think Earth is heaven. I think it probably used to be, but this isn't heaven. This is this place is a war zone, and you can either spend your life pulling yourself away from your purpose that you're meant to, or you can say yes, and you can say, all right, I'll clock on and I'll work, and that means giving your life up. That means that your life is no longer yours and you serve a higher purpose. That means that you're meant for something bigger than yourself. And they're going to try to make you think that you're useless, but you're beautiful. And I think a lot of us are going to understand that this is our war. We're in it again for another 100 years, and we'll win again. And we'll have peace again for another 100 years until the end. I don't think this is the end. I don't think so. I hope not anyway. But yeah, I think to conclude, find within you that you're in here for you're much bigger than what they're trying to tell you that you are. Thanks, guys.